The relationship between parents and their adult children is affected by various factors that start to develop during childhood. One of the most important factors is parenting style, which can foster trust, cooperation, and support, or, conversely, cause control and strict discipline. The McCullough family initially appeared to be a typical middle-class family, educated, financially secure. The strict parents raised 5 children, teaching them what they believed were proper morals and life goals. However, the children had a different view. As they grew older, they moved away and kept in touch with their aging parents only occasionally through text messages. They did not know that both of their parents had unexpectedly passed away 4 years ago. The truth emerged only when the family's doctor expressed concerns. The McCullough family resided in a large 3-story house in a peaceful upper-middle-class neighborhood in Great Baddow, Essex, England. The family was led by John McCullough, a respected professor at a prestigious university known for his research on autism spectrum disorders. His wife, Lois, dedicated herself to maintaining a well-organized home and raising their children. In October 1988, they welcomed their youngest child, a daughter named Virginia. At that time, both parents were in their 40s. Although Virginia's arrival was unexpected, the McCullough viewed it as a blessing due to their strong religious beliefs. The McCullough children were raised in a strict environment filled with discipline. Their household followed a rigid schedule, with each child responsible for specific tasks. Disobedience often resulted in physical punishment. For instance, Lois once used a belt on her child so harshly that the girl ended up with visible bruises, which led child welfare services to investigate the McCullough home. Even after many years together, Lois and John reportedly did not show much affection for each other. They slept in separate bedrooms, communicated in a reserved manner, and did not display any tenderness, such as hugs or kisses. This lack of affection extended to their children. The McCulloughs seldom expressed warmth or praise, as they believed it would spoil their kids. Instead, they commonly punished minor infractions. The children were expected to excel academically and help with household chores, but they were not allowed to visit friends or have guests over. Discipline was strictly enforced, and breaking the rules was not tolerated. Lois faced obsessive-compulsive disorder from a young age, along with misophobia, the fear of germs and dirt. This resulted in her compulsive cleaning and frequent disinfection of her home. Pets were not allowed, and her children were required to keep their rooms to her strict standards. Lois would often conduct surprise checks. Any hint of dust or disorder would lead to harsh punishments. As time went on, her mental health worsened. She became even more withdrawn, avoiding interaction with neighbors completely. She only left the house when necessary and rushed back as soon as she could. In her later years, she stopped making eye contact and kept her head down to minimize interactions. In addition to her existing fears, she developed agoraphobia, which left her nearly unable to leave her home. John, Lois's husband, had diabetes, which caused his eyesight to deteriorate quickly. By his 70s, he had retired from teaching and was living on a small pension. Similar to Lois, John rarely went out. When he did run errands, he often didn't greet others, not because he was rude, but because he struggled to recognize faces due to his poor vision unless someone spoke to him directly. Once the older children became adults, they moved out of the McCullough household and spread across the country. They created their own lives and families, keeping in touch with their parents mainly through occasional phone calls or, more commonly, text messages. This pattern illustrated the emotional distance within the McCullough family, as they did not have a tradition of celebrating holidays together or marking special occasions at home. For the grown children, it was sufficient to know that their parents were well taken care of by their youngest sibling, who continued to live in the family home. Virginia, the youngest of the McCullough children, stood apart from her older sisters. Unlike them, she didn't rush to leave home after high school. From a young age, Virginia was seen as odd and introverted. While her siblings had limited social lives due to their parents' strict rules, such as prohibiting guests and outings, Virginia took her isolation further. She found it difficult to connect even with her brothers and sisters. Instead of engaging with others, she often talked to herself and created complex stories which were mistaken for real events, leading others to label her a compulsive liar. However, she didn't seem bothered by her lack of social connections. Her parents believed that Virginia was destined by a higher power to care for them in their old age. Her absence of a personal life, lack of dating, and tendency to avoid people were seen as completely normal by Lois and John. They accepted her role as their caregiver as her true calling. It is uncertain whether Virginia pursued any formal education after high school, but it seems likely as her parents valued education highly. However, she struggled to maintain a stable career due to her unusual behavior and tendency to be dishonest. At one point, Virginia worked as a bartender at a local pub and also had a job at the post office. But mostly she spent her time at home, assisting her parents with household tasks. Whenever her parents asked why she wasn't working, Virginia had convincing explanations. She claimed to have been unfairly dismissed, was actively job hunting, or was waiting for a response from a large company that had reviewed her application. As her parents aged, they became increasingly less worried about her situation. By the time John was in his 70s, his vision had significantly declined. He had almost no sight in one eye and blurred vision in the other. Lois's anxiety had also intensified over the years, and she only ventured out for medical appointments with their family therapist, who managed their health and adjusted their treatments. Lois and John seldom interacted with neighbors and appeared to be content with their lifestyle, especially knowing Virginia would always be there to look after them. Virginia spent a significant amount of time on the computer, mostly playing games. She told her parents she was actively seeking work and sending out her resume to various companies. However, as time went on, she was unable to secure a job. To continue living off her parents without earning their disapproval, she devised a plan to elicit their pity instead. Knowing her parents were very concerned about health, they regularly went for medical checkups and took their medications on time. Virginia began to complain about her own health, fabricating serious conditions she didn't have. To make her claims more convincing, she visited doctors and described symptoms she found online. She underwent various tests and blood work, but none of her conditions were ever confirmed. She told her parents she was diagnosed with diabetes, which she claimed to have inherited from her father, along with heart problems. She also mentioned having a tumor that required urgent surgery. Concerned for her well-being, John and Lois provided her with money for treatment. In 2017, Virginia unexpectedly announced her pregnancy but never disclosed who the father was. John and Lois were taken aback by the news but were willing to embrace an illegitimate grandchild. They reasoned that their daughter, who was nearly 30 and single, could use someone to care for after they were gone. However, Virginia's deception escalated. She even purchased a fake pregnancy belly online to maintain the charade, but after a few months, she claimed to feel unwell and went to the hospital. Upon her return, she told her parents that she had lost the baby. John and Lois grieved this loss, unaware that their daughter had merely tricked them. Virginia asked her parents if she could take full control of their finances and accounts. Since her parents didn't understand modern technology and rarely left their home, they agreed. This decision gave Virginia complete access to the family accounts and bank cards, allowing her to use them however she wanted. At that time, Virginia had developed a habit of impulsive shopping. Now she had the means to support it. Every day, she ordered various unnecessary items from online stores, with most of them never even being opened. She would stash the packages away in a closet, under her bed, or in the storage room. However, there was one purchase, a kitchen appliance, that she gave to her mother, and it was well received. Her mother appreciated the gift genuinely, even praised Virginia, which was a rare occurrence. In early 2018, Virginia suddenly believed she was an artist, turned her room into an art studio, filled with paints, an easel, and supplies. She told her parents that art experts had praised her work, that her paintings would be shown in a contemporary art gallery soon. She even claimed she would become famous and make a lot of money. However, from the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s, Virginia started visiting online casino sites regularly, where she placed bets and lost money. Over time, her gambling problem worsened. After accessing her parents' savings, she began increasing her bets until she lost all their money. John and Lois were unaware that they were nearly bankrupt. They couldn't check their account balance because they didn't have access to online banking. At that time, Virginia had begun taking out loans using their names, indulging in frivolous purchases and gambling away their savings. This situation couldn't continue indefinitely. No one was making payments on the loans, and as Virginia kept borrowing more money, their debt continued to increase along with the accumulating interest. One day, the bank called their home phone, and John answered. They informed him about the large debts and unpaid loans. John felt faint, nearly had a heart attack upon hearing this news. He immediately told his wife. Together, they went to confront their daughter, Virginia, demanding an explanation. Virginia, pretending to be surprised, promised them that she would investigate the issue. She then sat at her computer, typed for a few minutes, claimed that hackers had accessed her account, stolen their money, and taken out loans in their name. Virginia assured her parents that she would resolve the problem and that they would recover their stolen money within the next few months. She pretended to be active and told her parents she had reported the criminals to the police, assuring them that they would be caught and everything would be returned. Virginia claimed that the issue had been solved, stating that the money was back in their account and that there were no loans to worry about for a while. John and Lois felt relieved, but 6 months later, they were contacted again about their accumulating debts. This time, Virginia convinced them that there had been a mistake in the bank's system and incorrect information had been shared. She was very convincing. Her elderly parents trusted her once more. Virginia realized that her situation was not sustainable. She had been borrowing money and understood that the bank would eventually demand repayment. Her parents would continue to receive calls, raising more questions about her financial situation. Sooner or later, they would see through her lies. If she continued to deceive them, they might even take the drastic step of contacting the authorities to find out what was really happening with their finances. Virginia carefully considered how she could continue living in her parents' house, using their money and taking loans in their names without facing any consequences. Surprisingly, her older siblings were completely oblivious to the situation. They rarely called their parents and visited them even less. In the meantime, John and Lois never expressed any concerns or complaints to their children. By March 2019, the situation had reached a critical point. Virginia realized she needed to take decisive action. Tragically, her plan was disturbing. She decided to kill her elderly parents. She knew she had to do this covertly, ensuring that no one would suspect anything and that everyone would continue to believe John and Lois were living happily in their spacious home. Fortunately, since they had always been reclusive, it was unlikely that the neighbors would notice anything amiss. Due to chronic health issues, Lois and John often needed various medications, and Virginia was in charge of managing their prescriptions. However, Virginia began to change the dosages of her mother's sedatives, blood pressure medications, and psychiatric drugs over several months without their knowledge. In doing so, she secretly harmed her parents while closely monitoring how they responded to the altered medications. Lois and John, believing their health issues were just typical seasonal problems and trusting their daughter, did not seek medical help for their worsening condition. They thought their symptoms would resolve on their own since they had experienced similar issues in the past. In early June 2019, Virginia collected enough strong prescription medications to potentially kill both her parents. She purchased a sharp kitchen knife along with tools for crushing pills. On June 17, 2019, Virginia made the decision that this would be the final day for her father and mother. She acted normally, making sure not to raise any suspicions. She prepared dinner, went shopping, and assisted her mother with various household tasks. In the evening, she sat with her parents while they watched television and later made them a lethal cocktail that would ensure they wouldn't wake up the next day. Her father sometimes enjoyed a small amount of strong alcohol from his collection of expensive bottles, which he had spent years accumulating. Now, in retirement, he took pleasure in tasting different drinks from his collection. Virginia mixed a deadly dose of heart medication into a bottle of aged whiskey. The alcohol concealed the bitter taste of the pills. However, her mother, Lois, did not drink alcohol. For her mother, Virginia prepared herbal tea and claimed the unusual bitterness came from medicinal herbs that were harmless. Lois, however, chose not to finish the tea. After drinking, John went to his room and Virginia assisted him, wishing him good night. She left her mother's tea on the bedside table, hoping Lois would drink it before heading to her own room. Virginia glanced at her mother through the partially open door before going to bed. That night, she slept peacefully, without any feelings of guilt or doubt. The next morning, she took her time and stayed under the covers until almost 11, a rare luxury in their household. She figured that if no one had come by to check on her and tell her to get up by that time, no one would. First, she entered her father's room and found him in bed, appearing to be peacefully asleep. When Virginia touched his hand, she realized it was cold and stiff, indicating that he had died shortly after going to sleep. His heart couldn't cope with the mixture of medications and alcohol, leading to his passing. Next, Virginia entered her mother's bedroom and discovered that Lois hadn't finished her drink. Although she was alive, Lois was unable to get out of bed because of the heavy sedatives she had taken. She felt disoriented and confused, struggling to understand her surroundings. Lois asked Virginia what time it was. Virginia replied that it was still early, suggesting that her mother could go back to sleep after she turned on her favorite radio station. Virginia left the room and went to the utility closet, where she took out a sharp knife and a hammer that she had bought earlier. It was clear she didn't have a solid plan, but she believed these tools would help her finish what she had started. When Virginia returned to her mother's room, Lois was smiling and listening to her favorite song, completely unaware of her daughter's presence. Virginia hesitated for a moment, then raised the hammer, brought it down forcefully onto Lois's head. Blood began to flow from the injury, but Lois calmly looked at her daughter and asked what she was doing. Without answering, Virginia grabbed the knife, started to stab her mother in the neck and chest in a frantic manner. Within a few minutes, the brutal attack was over. Virginia dropped the bloody knife on the floor, knelt down, and held her mother's still warm hand. She sat silently for about half an hour before going to the shower to wash off the blood and change into clean clothes. The next day, Virginia remained at home with her parents' bodies, trying to decide how to handle the situation. She thought about different ways to dispose of them, but soon realized it would be nearly impossible to discreetly remove and bury the bodies. The neighbors might notice something unusual. She lacked the physical strength to move both bodies and dig graves. Ultimately, Virginia came up with a bleak solution. She decided to seal her parents inside the house. However, executing this plan would take a lot of effort. She started by visiting a sporting goods store where she purchased 2 sleeping bags to serve as makeshift coffins. Next, she went to a hardware store and bought many rolls of plastic sheeting, cement mix, expanding foam, and cinder blocks, which were delivered to her home. When the neighbors inquired, Virginia said her father was working on a minor renovation project, and they did not ask any more questions. Overwhelmed by the task, Virginia carefully placed her parents in sleeping bags, tightly wrapped them in plastic sheeting and tape to create a seal. She then moved her father's body to his office, positioning it in a corner behind his desk. Following the instructions, she mixed the cement and started to construct a makeshift sarcophagus around him, pouring cement over the body using expanding foam to fill in any gaps. Virginia chose to leave her mother's body in the room where the violent incident happened. She pushed the sleeping bag, along with the blood-stained blanket and other bedding, into the closet. Next, she coated everything with expanding foam. Then, she wrapped the closet in 20 rolls of plastic sheeting to seal it off. Finally, she built a wall using the leftover cinder blocks, closing off the corner where the closet with her mother's remains was located. On the same day, Virginia ordered 2 new credit cards from the bank in the names of her deceased parents. To relieve stress, she started making online purchases. She also sent several messages to her siblings, pretending to be her mother. In these messages, she claimed that she and her father were taking a trip to the seaside to relax and improve their health. Her older sisters, who seldom visited, did not question her and simply wished their parents a pleasant getaway. The global issues provided Virginia with an excuse for the next 6 months. She continued her daily activities as if nothing had changed. She did grocery shopping, spoke with her neighbors, collected her parents' pensions, and occasionally sent messages to relatives pretending to be her mother, hoping to keep them from worrying. She even scheduled appointments for her parents with their doctor, but cancelled them for various reasons. When people inquired about her parents and why they hadn't been around, she said they were staying with one of their many children. In the spring of 2020, the global issues leading to a worldwide lockdown. This situation worked in Virginia's favor because she no longer needed to explain why her parents weren't seen outside. With the lockdown, no visitors were coming to see them anytime soon. During this time, Virginia would sometimes call the family doctor, pretending to be her mother to seek advice. However, when the doctor recommended an in-person appointment or offered to visit, she would make up excuses to avoid it. Virginia sent messages to her sisters using Lois's phone, inquiring about their lives and the grandchildren, but she never invited them to visit. If any of them mentioned planning a trip, she would discourage them from coming. She even called the police while pretending to be her mother, complaining about noisy neighbors or disturbances. Over time, Virginia's behavior became more unusual. She began to impose herself on people she barely knew, offering friendship and creating bizarre stories about her life, claiming she was about to get married and move away. She also harassed delivery drivers with numerous questions and frequently called the police for minor issues. In the small town, people saw her as the local eccentric, odd, but harmless. For over 4 years, Virginia successfully hid the fact that her parents had died. Even her siblings never realized they were gone, believing the messages and greeting cards they received were truly from their parents when, in fact, it was Virginia sending them. The only person who suspected something was amiss was the family doctor. He grew worried when the McCullough, who had always taken their health seriously, stopped showing up for routine checkups and lab tests. Virginia picked up their prescriptions and assured the doctor that her parents were fine. Although he repeatedly scheduled appointments, Virginia cancelled each time with various excuses. Several times, the doctor came to the McCullough's house to check on their health, but instead met Virginia, who said her parents were visiting relatives. In September 2023, the doctor called the police to express his concerns and requested an investigation. On September 13, 2023, the police visited the McCullough home and asked Virginia to bring her parents to the door. Virginia became visibly nervous, claimed that her parents had gone on vacation without their phones to avoid any disturbances. She assured them that her mom and dad would be back in a couple of weeks. However, the police became suspicious of their absence. On 15 September, Essex police executed a search warrant at McCullough's home, entered the house, and arrested Virginia McCullough. Virginia calmly stated that she had something to show them. She then led the officers to her father's office, pointing out a makeshift grave by the wall. Next, she took them to her mother's room and indicated a sealed closet. The bodies of the McCulloughs were found that same day. Due to advanced decomposition, it was challenging to determine the exact cause of death. However, Virginia, now facing charges, fully confessed and provided a detailed account of how she killed her parents. When asked for her motive, she cited old childhood grudges, claimed her parents were cruel, and described them as true monsters. When the tragic events at the McCullough household were revealed, the residents of the small town of Great Baddow were shocked. However, no one was more horrified than the older children of them, who had always believed their parents were alive and being cared for by their younger sister. The family's strained relationships allowed Virginia to hide her crime for many years. investigators determined that her motives were not based on childhood trauma or mistreatment, as she had claimed, but rather driven by financial gain. For years, Virginia had been using her parents' pension while accumulating significant debts in their names. McCullough is facing double murder charges and appeared in court on September 18th, where she was taken into custody. The next day, she appeared via video link at Basildon Crown Court from Peterborough Prison, where Judge Samantha Lee scheduled a plea hearing for December 1st. An inquest into the deaths was opened by Essex coroner Michelle Brown on October 10th and was paused while the police investigation continues. During the hearing, it was revealed that Lois McCullough died from a stab wound to the chest. The cause of death for John McCullough is still under investigation. On December 1st, McCullough appeared at Chelmsford Crown Court via video link from prison, but did not enter a plea. Her defense requested more time to prepare reports from expert witnesses. Judge Christopher Morgan scheduled the next hearing for February 5th, 2024, and set a deadline of February 1st for the defense to submit their report. At the hearing on July 4th, Virginia McCullough pleaded guilty to both counts of murder, and a sentencing hearing was set to begin on October 10th. The sentencing hearing occurred on October 11th, with Judge Johnson presiding. Virginia was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after a minimum of 36 years, which means she can be considered for release starting on October 3rd, 2059. McCullough's sentence was then sent to the Attorney General's office as part of the Sentencing Over Sentence program. However, in January 2025, the Attorney General's office reviewed the sentence and determined it did not meet the criteria for an appeal to the Court of Appeals.
Hey detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope, and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6-month-old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their 2 nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, she couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6th, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her 2 sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail: Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet, where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. He convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister. Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he to have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments, that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, the motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sandra Garner. Sandra and John met in the 1990s in the small town of Paris, Texas, which has a population of around 20,000. They worked together at a packaging company and quickly formed a close relationship, which developed into a romantic relationship. Sandra is 13 years older than John and has been through a divorce. She has 2 children from that marriage, Wes and Andrea. Although they appeared happy, their relationship faced many difficulties from the beginning. After dating for 2 years, they decided to get married. John became stepfather to Sandra's children, Wes and Andrea, and is also a husband who deeply loves his wife. They were married on January 1, 2000, in Las Vegas. John appears to be a friendly and sociable person, well liked by most people. However, those who knew him closely were aware of his struggles with alcohol. When he drank, he sometimes lost control and became aggressive. Additionally, he dealt with mental health issues and was on antidepressants. John worked as the HR manager, responsible for hiring and firing employees. He especially enjoys firing people, which leads many to think that he enjoys the power he has over others. Overall, John was a caring person who loved his family. After the wedding, his life seemed to get better, thanks to the sincere love between him and his wife, Sandra. They felt very compatible and quickly got along with their children, especially little Wes. However, Andrea did not like John, her stepfather. This is a normal psychological reaction of most children when they do not want to accept their parents' new partner, and it usually requires time to adapt. In 2014, Sandra started experiencing health issues and was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which greatly complicated her daily life. This has changed their family life a lot. John had to do the housework and take care of Sandra. During this time, she tried to work remotely to help out financially. He willingly supported her, helping her with daily tasks and providing emotional support. As a result, Andrea witnessed the love between her parents and began to empathize with John. The relationship between Andrea and John improved. She started helping John with more housework and taking care of Sandra. This brought their family closer. Unfortunately, Sandra's health continued to decline. She faced ongoing struggles with her illness, impacting both her physical and emotional well-being. The medication she took provided only partial relief, alleviating some symptoms, but leaving her feeling emotionally suppressed. At times, she found herself searching online for ways to end her life, feeling overwhelmed by depression. During those times, she confided in John about her thoughts and expressed her worries about being a burden to him. John reassured her, saying that if she were to die, he would not want to continue living either. This conversation made Sandra realize that she could not leave her children without a parent. In that moment, John became her reason for living. As Sandra's health deteriorated, she decided to leave her job because she was unable to work, either in the office or from home. This meant that John was the only one earning money to support the family, causing further financial hardship. Even so, John showed no signs that he was stressed. He always supported his wife and children, was always by their side, and tried his best to help. In 2016, the family moved to a small town called Mai Sang, about 50 kilometers south of Taoist in Alice County. With a population of less than 1,000, Mai Sang is a friendly and cozy community. They loved it so much that they decided to buy a house there. John and Sandra have good relationships with both families. This was proven when John's relatives moved into a new house right across from theirs. They frequently organized joint events and celebrated holidays together. The backyard of John and Sandra's house became a gathering place for everyone. By this time, their children, Wes and Andrea, had moved out and were living independently. Sandra continued to battle her illness, but the family seemed to be doing fine, at least until 2018. On January 1st, they were set to celebrate their 18th wedding anniversary. They planned to have dinner at a restaurant and invited Sandra's son, Wes, to join them, while Andrea was away on a trip and could not attend. Wes arrived for the celebration and left around 7 p.m. Typically, Sandra and John went to bed early, around 9 or 10 o'clock, and that night was no exception. However, a terrible tragedy struck later that night. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, the 911 operator received a call from Sandra. She said she needed help and asked for both the police and an ambulance, as her husband John had been attacked. According to her, an intruder had entered their home, attacked her husband, and then forced her into the bathroom. There, the assailant ordered her to count to 100, threatening to kill her if she did not obey. She complied with his demands. Sandra told the dispatcher that her husband John was wheezing and likely still alive, and she requested help. The dispatcher provided instructions for performing artificial respiration, and she followed. Fishers were dispatched immediately, but it took them about 15 minutes to arrive. When they entered the house, they heard Sandra calling for help from the bedroom. There, on the floor, lay her husband, whom she had pulled from the bed to administer artificial respiration. One of the officers checked John's body. He was still warm, but showed no signs of life. It seemed he was still alive when Sandra called asking for help. Unfortunately, John did not survive until the authorities arrived. The medical team confirmed that he was dead. The officers then suspected that the attacker might still be in the house, so they conducted a thorough search but found no one else present. The killer had already escaped. Meanwhile, Sandra was in shock and began to have a hysterical reaction to the situation. As a result, she was unable to communicate with the police initially and required assistance. Medical personnel had to help calm her down, while detectives and forensic experts arrived to carefully examine the crime scene and collect evidence. Around 2 a.m., Sandra regained consciousness and was taken to the police station for questioning. The police checked to see if her hands were stained with gunpowder and determined whether she was the person who attacked John or not. Forensic experts photographed the crime scene, collected the clothes she wore before the police arrived, and interviewed an important witness who could describe the attacker. The police hoped she could provide useful information to the detectives. However, her illness made it hard for her to focus. Even so, she made an effort to assist with the investigation. Sandra explained that she and John had gone to bed together before the attack occurred. Everything happened so quickly that she didn't fully comprehend what was happening or see the attacker clearly. She was overwhelmed with fear. She recalled being awakened by a gunshot around 12:45 a.m., followed by a second shot. In the bedroom, she saw a man with a flashlight and a gun jump from the bed to the floor. She hid and screamed, hoping someone would hear her and come to help. The intruder was wearing a blue sweatshirt and jeans, a mask, and was much taller than she was. Sandra pleaded with her attacker not to kill her. He responded that he was there to take revenge on John and meant her no harm. He explained that he had been working hard at the company where John worked, but he was fired several years ago, which led to him losing his home and ruining his life. This grudge against John was the reason for his actions. Then demanded to see the safe. Sandra led him to the closet, where the reflections from the metal door allowed her to get a better look at him. She tried to get a better look at him, but he threatened to kill her if she did so. Fearful, she turned away and stopped trying to look at him. Then, he opened the safe and handed over the money, which she estimated to be around $18,000. She couldn't provide an exact figure since it had been a long time since she last counted it, but she was confident that it was $18,000. The police had no way to verify this, so they had to take her word. After taking the money, the attacker ordered her to go to the bathroom and count to 100. The interrogation lasted several hours, after which the police allowed Sandra to return home. By then, her family had gathered to support her during this difficult time. She needed them now, more than ever. She was deeply saddened by what had happened. However, some family members doubted her sincerity. Many people noticed her strange behavior immediately after she spoke to the police. She returned to her house, even though the attacker might return, as if she was not worried about the incident. In fact, Sandra seemed to be hoping the man would come back so she could attack him. Meanwhile, her family arrived at her son Wes's house and informed him that John had been killed. He was shocked and immediately went to the police station to report the incident. What was strange was that he did this before going to visit his mother. He did not even call her to ask about the situation. Later, the police understood Wes's actions. He had something important to share with them. From the very first sentence, he confirmed to the police that he believed the murder was committed by his own mother, Sandra. However, he felt very embarrassed to say this because it was difficult to give testimony against the closest relative. He was skeptical that an intruder could have entered their home unnoticed, even though his parents had 2 dogs. These dogs should have barked to warn of danger. His statements puzzled the police. During the initial interrogation, Sandra's testimony was so clear and convincing that the police had no doubts about her. However, Wes maintained that his mother could have killed John, prompting the police to consider this possibility. Police thoroughly searched the entire crime scene, including the main house and several outbuildings like a garage and a barn. In the garage, they discovered Sandra's Ford Mustang. They were looking for her self-defense pistol, which Wes mentioned was usually kept in her purse but is sometimes hidden under the seat of the vehicle. Unfortunately, they could not locate the weapon. In the house, police discovered a total of 49 pistols and 10 rifles. All of these weapons belonged to John, a gun enthusiast who did not know how to store them safely. These weapons are kept all over the house, suggesting that John wanted a gun to be ready for use in emergency situations. This indicated that he might have feared an attack from enemies. However, one notable weapon was missing from his collection: a Taurus .38 revolver registered to Sandra. It is possible that the revolver was lost, stolen, or misplaced. Additionally, a small amount of gunpowder residue was found on her hand, which could have come from accidental circumstances, such as being near her husband John when he was killed. Besides, during cardiopulmonary resuscitation, Sandra touched her husband. The amount of gunpowder residue on her hands was minimal, suggesting she might have come into contact with it after the murder. Initially, she may have had more gunpowder traces, but they may have been deleted during the move. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it was quite suspicious, leading to her becoming a suspect in her husband's murder. During the investigation, police decided to examine Sandra and John's tablets and mobile phones. These devices were confiscated to analyze their messages and internet searches. Investigators discovered that Sandra was conducting very suspicious searches, including searching for fentanyl and other powerful drugs. Even more troubling, shortly before John's death, she had searched for methods to kill someone and ways to conceal a crime. However, these searches are not enough to definitely confirm her malicious intentions, as they are mixed with normal searches. Still, they raise suspicion. On January 4, 2018, police investigated the possibility that Sandra was involved in John's murder. The only issue was that they had yet to locate her gun. Officers consulted her son, Wes. He suggested that if he were searching for the gun, he would check his mother's car. Consequently, police decided to conduct a more thorough search of the car and garage. When the detectives arrived at Sandra's house, they found that the garage was locked. They asked Wes to open the door for them, and he went to see his mother. He have asked her to give him a spare key so the police could get into the garage. However, she was visibly terrified. She insisted that she would not let the officers in, demanding that they leave immediately. All those who witnessed this gesture were shocked. Her reaction left them feeling strange. Previously, she had communicated openly with the police and was willing to help in the investigation. However, on that day, she had a very strong reaction. Initially, Sandra expressed disappointment with her relatives because they suspected her of guilt. Afterward, she left the house and went to her garage in an attempt to stop the officers from searching. However, her efforts were in vain. The police informed her that they would conduct a search, even if she did not want it. If she refused to provide the key, they would break down the door, since they had a warrant. Consequently, she had no choice but to comply and unlock the garage. When they got in, they immediately checked under the driver's seat of the Mustang. There they found a grocery bag containing a paper towel that wrapped a rusty .38 caliber revolver. This suggests that during the initial search, the weapon was hidden elsewhere, and she later returned it to its usual location. This is absolutely certain because the police team that conducted the previous search was present at the scene again. Sandra was likely very nervous and reluctant to let the police into the garage. The investigators questioned Wes again, and he claimed to have seen Sandra put the murder weapon in her car after the police had left. However, she denied this accusation. It was puzzling because she had no motive to kill her beloved husband, who had always cared for her. The detectives decided to question Sandra again, not just as a witness, but as a suspect in her husband's brutal murder. They made it clear they suspected her of the crime. They pressured her, accusing her of lying and trying to obstruct the investigation. Although she was visibly upset and denied any involvement in the crime, her emotional response seemed sincere. She confirmed that there were no weapons hidden in her car. She was emotional at the time and could not provide any further information. Experts analyzed the flight path of the bullet from the gun used in the case. They determined that the shots were fired from the revolver found in the car, and the bullets collected matched this weapon. However, no fingerprints or DNA from Sandra were found on the revolver, indicating that it could have been used by anyone. Despite this, she could still be arrested and charged, but it would take more evidence to build a full case. The police went to arrest Sandra at her home, but she was not there, so they waited for her to return. When she drove up in her car, she was surprised to find herself immediately arrested. John's family watched from the windows of a nearby house. As the police handcuffed the family members of John erupted in applause. They feel grateful that justice was finally served and believe that she was the one who shot John. Sandra was taken into custody and her bail was set at $2 million, an amount she could not afford. As a result, she remained in prison for a long time. On March 21, 2018, Sandra Garner was officially charged with the murder of her husband, John. She spent 1.5 years in prison, which took a severe toll on her health. When she appeared in court in September 2019 in Waxahachie, Texas, she looked very unwell. It seemed that the situation had drained her of her remaining energy. She appeared physically worn out and emotionally exhausted. From the outset, the prosecutor's office believed they had strong reasons and sufficient evidence to convict her. However, as the prosecution's case progressed, it became increasingly clear that Sandra might avoid punishment, as the evidence against her was largely circumstantial. One of the key witnesses in this case is Sandra's son, Wes. He actively sought to push the investigation forward, even implicating his own mother. Wes confidently claimed that the weapon should be in the car, despite the fact that investigators found it was not there previously. Typically, someone who shares such detailed information about a crime raises suspicions of their involvement. This led many to wonder, did Wes want John, his stepfather, dead? Did he orchestrate the incident to have Sandra, his sick mother, arrested instead of facing consequences himself? When investigators looked closely at Wes, they discovered several troubling issues. He was able to kill John because he had access to the entire house and knew where the gun was hidden. Investigators discovered that the suspicious online searches only occurred on nights when Wes visited his parents, John and Sandra, after they had gone to bed. Tablet searches can be traced back to Wes in the first place. He seemed determined to make his mother, Sandra, pay for this crime, and even implied that she had a weapon. Wes's alibi was highly questionable. He claimed that he was at home watching videos on his laptop at the time of the crime, but no one could verify this. He lived alone, and during the initial investigation, the police overlooked a crucial detail. His laptop was set to a different time zone. Additionally, Wes can set the video to play continuously while he is absent, meaning he had no real alibi. Furthermore, John had a motive, as he was named in John's will, and might have wanted to access his inheritance quickly. In contrast, Sandra had no reason to want John dead. John was a significant part of her life and had cared for her during her illness for many years. He is the only one who earns money to support the family, and they live in harmony and attached together. During the trial, it was highlighted that the police had failed to act professionally. It took them 15 minutes to get to the crime scene. The police who conducted the investigation that night were inexperienced, as they had never been involved in a criminal investigation before. This led to some serious mistakes. In addition, the police needed to use special bags to preserve traces of gunpowder on Sandra's hands, but they did not do so. Photos taken at the crime scene on a police officer's mobile phone were later accidentally deleted and could not be recovered. The officers also did not conduct thorough interrogations of former employees at John's workplace, although Sandra said that the killer was fired from John's company, and from then on, he developed hatred towards John. The police only conducted interviews with a few witnesses, and they prioritized questioning John's family. Consequently, the prosecutor had to address the defense's claims about the police's lack of competence. There have been numerous investigations into police misconduct, and those found to be at fault were disciplined. The prosecutor needed to clarify why the police did not collect fingerprints from the door handle of the Mustang where the revolver was discovered. Forensic experts might have found a fingerprint belonging to another suspect, the person who hid the weapon. If that person was really Wes, he could have entered the house without making the dog bark because they recognized him. However, there were uncertainties. Sandra cannot recognize her son Wes's eyes or voice. She said she felt very scared at the time, and due to her illness, it was difficult for her to concentrate. As a result, she overlooked many details and did not fully understand who she was speaking to, and Wes could have altered his voice during their conversation. During the trial, Sandra asserted that her son, Wes, was responsible for the murder of her husband, John. She noted that all evidence pointed to Wes, and he even hid her gun and tried to arrange everything to blame her. Recently, she had observed his suspicious behavior and noted that he had become distant from John, with whom they had previously been friendly. To verify her claims, a cross-examination was conducted. This process can help prove innocence, but it carries risks. Even small mistakes in her answers can sway the jury against them. She has difficulty during this interrogation process, providing inconsistent answers and leaving many gaps in her story. She believes the cause was confusion and health issues, which may have left the jury unconvinced. The prosecution presented over 400 pieces of evidence and interviewed 25 witnesses, leading them to believe that Sandra would be found guilty of her husband's murder, John. However, when it was the defense's turn, they successfully refuted the prosecution's arguments and pointed out the negligence in the investigation process. They point out that initially, Wes was not considered a suspect. There was no testing for gunpowder residue on his hands, no polygraph examination, and no thorough investigation of his alibi. When the jury began deliberating, many thought it would be a long one. However, they returned a verdict after just a few hours. In the late afternoon, when the court announced the verdict, all of Sandra's family gathered in the courtroom to hear the decision. The jury found her innocent, bringing her immense relief. Overcome with emotion, she cried and embraced her lawyers. After serving 21 months in prison, she was finally free to go home. However, this news upset her son, Wes, and John's family. They believed that she was responsible for John's death and expected her to be sentenced to prison. The relationship between John's family and Sandra's family became strained, and this eventually forced his family to move away. Now, Sandra believes that Wes was the one who killed John. Sandra's relationship with her son, Wes, has deteriorated greatly. After the trial, they completely stopped communicating. Sandra's daughter, Andrea, continues to support she and believes in her innocence. The police have not closed the case, and for a while, they focused on Wes as the main suspect in the murder. However, valuable time has been lost. Many clues were lost, and many things were not done in time. As a result, it is now nearly impossible to definitively prove anyone's guilt. Evidence related to this case has been stored for years, and no one has taken the initiative to investigate further. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Erica DiNardo. Erica DiNardo was born in Novi Ligure. Her parents were Francesco DiNardo and Susanna Cassini, and she had a younger brother named Gianluca, her father. Francesco was an engineer and a top manager at a local chocolate company. He was a respected man who built his success through hard work. After moving from southern Italy, Susanna, her mother, worked as an accountant at the same company. But after having Erica and Gianluca, she chose to become a full-time homemaker to focus on raising her children. Susanna was very religious and frequently attended church, spending her free time dedicated to family life. The Susanna family lived in a spacious villa in the suburbs of Novi Ligure. Erica was a 16-year-old girl from a wealthy family. She did not show much interest in studying during her school years, but in high school, she began taking accounting courses at the urging of her mother, where she seemed to prove academically successful. Her younger brother, Gianluca, was 11 at the time and focused on his studies. Hoping to follow in his father's footsteps, their family life was peaceful and stable, with no signs of impending turmoil. Then, on February 21, 2001, everything changed. One evening, two women were driving down a narrow street in Novi Ligure when they saw a girl walking. She was covered in blood. The women quickly stopped to help her. The girl introduced herself as Erica and informed them that someone had just attacked her mother and younger brother. What surprised them was that the women were Erica's neighbors. They checked on Erica and called the police, who quickly arrived at Erica's family home. When the police arrived, they entered the house and witnessed a horrific scene on the kitchen floor. They found the body of 42-year-old Susanna. The kitchen table was knocked over and broken. Susanna had been attacked and murdered. Bloody shoe prints could be seen on the floor. Police then began searching for Erica's younger brother, who, according to Erica, had also been assaulted. They first checked the ground floor but did not find him, so they began to search upstairs. At the bottom of the staircase, they discovered a strange blue liquid of unknown origin. They found Gianluca in the bathroom, where the scene was even more gruesome than downstairs. The boy had suffered 57 stab wounds. At first, the police investigating Erica's house suspected that a robbery had taken place and resulted in murder. However, the brutal nature of the attack was extreme and inconsistent with typical robbery scenarios, where thieves often restrain their victims and attempt to conceal their actions. Leaving survivors would have added to the evidence against them. Furthermore, it was odd that the intruders chose to break in late at night, when all the residents would likely be home. This made the police suspicious when Francesco returned home. He was deeply saddened to learn that his wife and son had passed away. He tried to comfort Erica. Holding her in tears, Erica told police that she had been in her room upstairs that night, listening to loud music at about 8:03 p.m. Her mother and younger brother returned home from shopping when Erica turned down the music. She heard screaming from the first floor, followed by a struggle on the stairs. She then saw a strange man attacking her younger brother in the bathroom, and he quickly turned on her mother in a desperate attempt to protect Erica. Her mother screamed for Erica to run and save herself. Erica ran into the living room, where she grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the table and smashed it over the attacker's head, allowing her to escape the house. Minutes after Erica ran into the street, several neighbors in cars stopped to help and called the police. The carabinieri arrived quickly on the scene, and Erica was able to get a clear look at her attackers. She provided sketches that accurately described the two men. The first man had a thick beard, was large in build, and looked much older because of his gray hair. The second attacker was of average build and appeared to be about 25 years old. Forensic scientists examined the crime scene and confirmed that the attackers had entered the house through the garage. However, neighbors reported that the family pets had been quiet throughout the evening. Although they appeared to react aggressively to strangers, it appears that Gianluca tried to escape up the stairs, but was caught. At that moment, Susanna fought back desperately, reaching the kitchen, but eventually passed out and died from loss of blood. There was public outrage over the crime, which was the sixth case of attacks and robberies in which a certain gang of migrants was involved. The police had been unable to do anything about it yet, despite the suspected robbery. No valuables or belongings were found missing during a search of the family home, raising suspicions. However, the public shrugged off the news, blaming the government and police for their inaction. The debate over increased security and tackling illegal immigration has resurfaced, with news outlets across Italy criticizing the government's failure to manage the dangerous influx of migrants. There have been calls for citizens to take the issue into their own hands. Meanwhile, Erica continued to assist the police. They quickly noticed that she was not injured. Erica's demeanor was unusually calm and cold, which was surprising considering she had lost half of her family in a horrific event. Even the adult men in the police force struggled to cope with the scene of the tragedy, which was described as the bloodiest crime in the history of the Carabinieri police in the investigation. Despite this, Erica's apparent indifference to the situation was striking. The police decided to show her photos from previous robberies involving similar migrants from their database. During this viewing, she recognized a young man, the same person whose head she had struck with a bottle. His name is Arben, an Albanian from Italy with a permanent residence permit. The young man had a minor issue with the police, but it wasn't serious at that time. Police quickly located Arben and took him to the police station for questioning. They also discovered clothes at his home that matched the description of the attackers given by Erica. However, under questioning, he maintained his innocence. Arben provided a solid alibi, stating that on February 21 at 8:30 p.m., he was bowling with friends. His testimony was confirmed by both witnesses and surveillance camera footage, leading to his release. Furthermore, Erica claimed that she had hit him in the face with a heavy glass bottle, which should have left a mark, but Arben had no head injuries. Police noticed increasing inconsistencies in Erica's testimony. Her behavior seemed suspicious. Raising the police's suspicions, the motive for the crime seemed suspicious because valuables were still in the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The dogs were not barking. And the brutality of the attack raised further suspicion. Generally, criminals harbor grudges that lead to multiple knife wounds. This often suggests a personal motive for the attack. While looking into potential suspects, the police suspected that Erica might be the attacker. However, considering the case and the extent of the injuries. Erica could not have done it alone. Perhaps Erica had an accomplice involved in the case. This led the police to focus their investigation on Erica. They learned that her relationship with her family had recently become strained, although it did not seem serious. Erica and Susanna had very different views on life. The very religious Susanna could not find common ground with Erica, who had no interest in religion. Disturbing entries found in Erica's diary revealed that she had a poor relationship with her younger brother, Gianluca, and that she had even beaten him several times. In Erica's latest diary entries, the police found a name, Mauro Favaro. Nicknamed Mauro, they discovered that Erica's mother had intercepted communications between her and Mauro. Prompting them to investigate further, Mauro was 17 years old. The son of a local bar owner, Erica had met him a few months before the tragedy, and there were rumors that they might even have been engaged. Susanna was against their relationship from the start, mainly because of Mauro's bad reputation. Susanna worried that Erica might make a serious mistake by rushing into a relationship as their relationship progressed. Several witnesses observed that Mauro and Erica's daily routines were similar. They would return home when their parents were at work or away on business trips. When they returned home, they would lock themselves in their room, where they would smoke marijuana and engage in various sexual activities, despite the disapproval of their friends. Their intimate relationship continued to grow. The young couple spent almost all of their free time together and neglected other aspects of their lives. Police believe that Susanna's anxiety and interference in Erica and Mauro's relationship could have endangered Susanna's life. They suspect that Erica may have attacked her younger brother, with whom she had a strained relationship. During this time, Mauro may have been attacking Susanna. On February 23, the police decided to take Erica and Mauro back to the crime scene to observe their reactions and behavior. Police claimed that Erica needed to reenact and describe the attack, hoping to uncover inconsistencies in her story that would reveal if she was lying. Erica continued to cooperate with the investigation, but after a thorough examination of the crime scene, the police quickly noticed discrepancies between the evidence and Erica's account. While Mauro sat in the house, he listened closely to his girlfriend's story. However, he remained silent the entire time and seemed very tense. It's clear that Mauro knows more than he is letting on. Later, the couple was taken back to the police station and placed in a small room. They were being filmed, and everything that occurred was recorded. But the Erica and Mauro were unaware of this. The Mauro appeared very anxious, while the Erica tried to soothe him. After a few minutes, they both began to relax a bit and started talking about some truly disturbing topics. Mauro describes in detail how he killed Gianluca and expresses his delight at the unusual color of the water in the bathroom. Erica believes that the police have no solid evidence against them, so they will probably be released after questioning. She has prepared carefully for this situation, telling Mauro that she will be the only witness and will protect him. Erica says that they can now openly declare their love for each other and walk around the city without fear. She then happily calls out to him and kisses him. At this point, the recording in the room ends. The prosecutor's office received a recording of confessions from Mauro and Erica regarding the massacre of Erica's mother and brother. The case shocked everyone, including the local community, who were preparing to take action against migrants. Erica was sent to the Beccaria Juvenile Detention Center in Milan, while Mauro was transferred to Ferranporti in Turin. At the time, Mauro and Erica were being questioned separately, despite her earlier promise to keep the secret and protect Mauro, which was captured on video. However, when the police put pressure on them, Mauro and Erica began to blame each other. Erica claimed that Mauro had killed her mother first and then her brother. She said that she was locked in the bathroom and was only released by him after the crime had been committed. According to her, Mauro acted out of anger because Susanna would not allow them to be together. Erica claimed to be a victim of manipulation and said that she was so depressed at the time of the crime that she barely knew what she was doing, Erica remained in contact with friends and even mentioned that she would be released soon because she was innocent and had been harmed by Mauro. However, the police had good reason to believe that Erica was actually the one who initiated the massacre and was involved in the murder. Her relatives described Erica as confident, cool, and assertive. While Mauro was seen as passive, this led the police to conclude that Erica was the driving force behind the attack, making them a couple involved in the murder. During the investigation, a substance was discovered on the floor. Initially, Erica and Mauro intended to use a special poison instead of a knife to harm Gianluca. As the poison was not water-soluble, Gianluca accidentally knocked over the cup containing the poison as he ran up the stairs. Leading to the discovery of the substance by a forensic scientist, Mauro claimed that Erica was the mastermind behind the idea and the crime. Mauro began to insist that he had not entered Erica's house that day. He claimed that Erica had often expressed a desire to harm her family, as they were interfering with her happiness. Mauro then recounted that Erica had let him into the house that evening and given him rubber gloves and a knife. He insisted that he had refused her request to kill younger brother and mother, which enraged Erica. She then locked him in the bathroom and only let him out after she had finished with her family members herself. The prosecutor's office had strong evidence that Mauro had lied. Mauro then cooperated with the investigation. He revealed the location of the murder weapon, gloves, and poison. Eventually, these items were found through the analysis of new evidence. It was revealed that Erica had killed Susanna and Gianluca, but Mauro was also an accomplice. They had inflicted multiple stab wounds on the two victims on November 28, 2001. Erica's trial began as scheduled. She and Mauro both underwent extensive interviews and evaluations, which revealed that Erica had mental health problems. Specifically, she exhibited characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder, showing a strong dependence on the admiration of others. Erica and Mauro were both found to be sane and competent to attend the hearing. During the hearing, both accused each other. In the sequence of events that evening, a violent argument broke out between Erica and her mother when they returned home. Mauro was near the garage and, upon hearing the noise, rushed inside to drown out the noise and avoid alarming the neighbors. Erica turned up the music. Mauro then attacked her mother in the kitchen with a knife, covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming, and began to inflict several blows. During the struggle, Susanna knocked over a kitchen chair, breaking it. Seconds after the attack began, Erica joined Mauro in attacking her mother. Susanna fought off both attackers as best she could, but eventually she became weak and died. Before she died, she begged for Gianluca's life. Initially, the two did not intend to kill the boy, but since the child could be a witness, they decided to kill him as well. Erica and Mauro then attempted to drown him in the bathroom, but Gianluca fought back violently. They eventually decided to stab Gianluca after the murder. The two considered killing Erica's father, Francesco, but they were too exhausted and abandoned the idea. Believing they would not be able to overpower him, Erica and Mauro attempted to clean up the blood, but were unsuccessful. They then cleaned the knives to remove any fingerprints. One knife was discarded in the trash, along with the gloves. While the other was left on the kitchen floor, Mauro then left on his scooter. A passerby noticed him on the road, particularly his blood-stained pants, and later reported this to the police. On December 14, 2001, the Turin Juvenile Court sentenced Erica DiNardo to 16 years in prison for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Mauro Favaro received a 14-year sentence, 2 years less than Erica, because he actively cooperated with police during the investigation. The prosecutor's office highlighted that his cooperation was crucial in solving the crime. After hearing the verdict, Erica broke down and cried. While Mauro appeared confused, Erica became so angry that she started insulting everyone, including the judge. Her sudden change in mood raised concerns about the fairness of the verdict. Erica and Mauro will spend part of their sentences in juvenile facilities until they turn 21, after which they will be transferred to adult correctional facilities. In 2005, Erica requested to be transferred to a prison with a more supportive environment. However, her behavior remained unchanged, resulting in her request being denied. A psychological evaluation in 2006 deemed Erica a danger to society, revealing a severe personality disorder that required long-term psychotherapy. Experts warned that if nothing was done, she would likely harm others after her release from prison. After receiving treatment, Erica's condition improved significantly. She learned to control her anger and became calmer. She earned a degree in philosophy and even defended her thesis on Socrates. In April 2009, the committee praised her progress. Erica was finally released on March 3, 2010. She joined a volunteer organization that helps former prisoners reintegrate into society. Erica spent some time in a psychiatric hospital in Castiglione della Stiviere, where she met a musician who was volunteering there. They developed a romantic relationship, and she later married him. They moved to a farm near Lake Niposi. Throughout this time, her father, Francesco, remained supportive and close to her. Erica regrets her past actions. She misses her mother and younger brother and hopes that they can forgive her. In 2010, Mauro is released from prison. He finds a job as a bartender and moves in with a girlfriend. They later marry and have a daughter. However, in December, Mauro is seen visiting the graves of Susanna and Gianluca at a cemetery. The next day, news of this visit makes the front page of the local newspapers, attracting the attention of Erica and her family. She feels that Mauro's act of visiting the grave is just a way for him to gain national fame. Erica finds it shameful that he takes pictures and tries to sell them to the media. Erica's actions, in this context, highlight her coldness. Mauro expresses remorse for his past mistakes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States. His father, chemist Lionel Herbert Dahmer, and his mother, Joyce Annette Dahmer, faced various challenges. Joyce struggled with depression and possibly other mental health issues, which required her to take large amounts of medication, even during her pregnancy. Despite these difficulties, their first child, Jeffrey, was born healthy and displayed a cheerful and curious personality in his early years. However, when he was about 5 years old, he developed a double inguinal hernia and required surgery. Initially, Jeffrey was described as an active and cheerful child, but after the surgery, his parents observed a change in his demeanor. He seemed more withdrawn and showed signs of depression. One day, Jeffrey witnessed his father taking an animal carcass from under the house and placing it on a tray. The sight caught Jeffrey's attention, and he became curious. Without hesitation, he began playing with it. His father, Lionel, whose job and academic career required him to move several times, eventually earned a doctorate in chemistry. This achievement led Jeffrey's family to settle in Bath, Ohio, where they found a large plot of land surrounded by trees. After moving to Ohio, Jeffrey began to avoid social interaction, preferring solitude. However, he cherished the time he spent with his father, participating in various activities together, such as fishing. Jeffrey enjoyed watching his father prepare fish and was curious about what was inside them. Lionel noticed this passion in his son and suggested that he learn taxidermy. Although Jeffrey did not experience physical abuse at home, he grew up in a tense atmosphere. His parents, Lionel and Joyce, argued frequently. Lionel often criticized Joyce for not taking good care of their son, while Joyce expressed frustration with Lionel's long hours at work and school, feeling that he was neglecting the family. Over time, they realized that Jeffrey was quite withdrawn and had difficulty connecting with others. When Jeffrey was 7, he got his first pet, a dog. This brought him immense joy, and he took great care of the dog, even bringing it along when he explored the area for animal carcasses. At the same time, Joyce became pregnant with their second child. To help Jeffrey feel included, his parents allowed him to choose a name for his younger brother, which he decided would be David. Jeffrey attended primary school in Bath, where his father made efforts to encourage him to socialize with other children. Although these efforts were largely unsuccessful, on weekends, Lionel spent time with Jeffrey, tending to the garden and bees together, and attending local fairs. Their relationship was strong, and Jeffrey even wrote poems for his father during this time. His mother, Joyce, was hospitalized for depression and anxiety, which was a difficult period for the family. When Jeffrey entered secondary school, he continued to enjoy dissecting animals and began to explore his abuse. During this time, he kissed a boy from the neighborhood, which led him to realize that he was attracted to boys. Although he struggled to accept this part of himself, Jeffrey faced increasing anxiety due to his father Lionel's homophobic views. Throughout high school, he endured bullying. To cope with the challenges around him, he turned to alcohol. This dependence on alcohol led him to come to school drunk and even drink during class. As a result, he was often reprimanded and disciplined. His behavior varied greatly. Sometimes he was the center of attention, while at other times he was very shy in school. Jeffrey often engaged in behavior that was considered humorous or eccentric. He acted as the class clown, frequently imitating epileptic seizures and making sheep noises during class. As he grew older, he even began drawing chalk sketches of human bodies on the classroom floor. Around the age of 14 or 15, Jeffrey began to experience disturbing obsessive thoughts related to sex. This struggle intensified over time, leading him to develop various fantasies. However, unlike typical teenage fantasies, Jeffrey's were more disturbing. Jeffrey found his senior year of high school particularly challenging. Because his parents decided to get a divorce, Lionel moved away and took refuge in a hotel, while Jeffrey's mother also decided to leave home, taking her youngest son, David, with her and leaving Jeffrey alone. Just a few weeks after graduating, he began to explore his fantasies more freely. Jeffrey's fantasies began to take shape in a disturbing way. He often thought about a young man he had met while playing sports on his way home. This man frequently jogged in the evenings, shirtless, and Jeffrey found himself drawn to him. Jeffrey then imagined a scenario where he would hide in the bushes, and when the man passed by, Jeffrey would attack him and take him home. However, on the day, Jeffrey decided to make this fantasy a reality. The young man did not show up for his usual jog. Another fantasy that Jeffrey cherished was picking up a hitchhiker and taking him home. In this scenario, they would share an intimate moment and eventually live together in harmony. This fantasy became a reality in 1978 when Jeffrey was driving down the road and spotted a young hitchhiker who fit his ideal type. Jeffrey stopped and offered the young man a ride in his car. The young man, eager to go to the summer music festival, accepted Jeffrey's invitation to have a beer at his house first. His name was Stephen Hicks, and he had just turned 18. They returned to Jeffrey's house together after drinking a few beers. Stephen asked Jeffrey to fulfill his promise to take him to the festival. Jeffrey hesitated, and an argument ensued. Eventually, Stephen decided to leave, which escalated the situation in a fit of rage. Jeffrey hit Stephen with a dumbbell, causing him to fall to the floor, unconscious. In a panic, Jeffrey strangled Stephen until he stopped breathing. Jeffrey then processed Stephen's body, placing it in 5 black trash bags. He loaded the bags into his car and drove off to find a place to dispose of them. Jeffrey began to drive erratically and out of his lane. The patrolman saw Jeffrey and asked him why he was driving like that. Jeffrey confided in the officer about his struggles with insomnia and his parents' recent divorce. Expressing feelings of hopelessness about his life, he remained polite and calm throughout the conversation. When the officer asked about the car, he explained that it was full of trash and that he was looking for a place to properly dispose of it. Jeffrey made a good impression on the officer, who asked him to return home. Jeffrey complied and returned to his house with the trash bags containing Stephen's body. He eventually hid the bags in the basement. The next day, he continued to process Stephen's body. Attempting to crush the bones, he then scattered them in various locations behind the house. In the days that followed, Jeffrey paid attention to newspapers and news reports, hoping to find any updates on the missing man. However, he found none. He had committed a serious crime, but it was still a secret. This prompted him to repeat his crime. A week after Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, left home, Lionel found his son living alone and increasingly anxious. He encouraged Jeffrey to find a job, but Jeffrey showed little interest instead. He spent his days drinking. To help, Lionel took him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and arranged sessions with psychologists. Lionel encouraged Jeffrey to pursue his studies at Ohio University. Although Jeffrey did not outright refuse, he continued to drink and think about Stephen's murder. In the following months, he donated blood in exchange for money to buy alcohol. By the end of the semester, his academic difficulties led to his expulsion from the university. However, Lionel was determined and convinced Jeffrey to enlist. Believing that military discipline could have a positive impact on him, Jeffrey complied and successfully passed the selection process. His passion for medical care took him to San Antonio, Texas, where he trained to become a military medic. Allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of human anatomy, Jeffrey eventually found his passion in his work. After 6 months, he had changed dramatically. Military physical training not only improved his physique, but also made him more sociable. For the first time, Lionel witnessed his son smile, although not while on leave. After completing his training, Jeffrey was deployed to a base in Germany. Unfortunately, his struggles with alcohol were not resolved, and when the authorities learned of the problem, he was discharged from the military upon returning to the United States. Jeffrey chose to distance himself from his father instead of going home. He settled in Miami, where he rented a hotel room and found work at a diner. At first, his life seemed okay, but it quickly became unstable. Jeffrey drank more and soon found himself unable to afford a hotel room, forcing him to sleep on the beach. Realizing that he could not continue like this, he decided to ask his father for financial help. Lionel, understanding that giving his son money might cause him to drink more, Lionel bought Jeffrey a ticket home instead, determined not to give up. Lionel committed to helping his son find a better path forward. Lionel picked Jeffrey up from the airport. Jeffrey greeted him with a bright smile, which initially led Lionel to believe that his son was simply happy to see him. However, it soon became clear that Jeffrey had consumed a significant amount of alcohol before the flight. Faced with this reality, Lionel decided that the best course of action would be to send Jeffrey to live with his grandmother in Milwaukee. During his time with her, Jeffrey matured considerably. He developed a deep respect for his grandmother, who, by many accounts, was the only person he felt truly close to. Jeffrey helped her with various chores around the house and even attended church with her. During the first few weeks, Jeffrey began reading the Bible, which helped him alleviate some of his negative thoughts. However, he still struggled with his fantasies. One day, he stole a male mannequin from a clothing store and hid it in his closet. He saw the mannequin as the perfect companion because it never rejected him, made no demands, and inspired him. However, one day, his grandmother discovered the mannequin and was horrified. She insisted that Jeffrey leave the house, but he calmed her down by promising to get rid of it one day. While sitting in the library, a man approached Jeffrey and handed him a note instructing him to meet in the men's room. Although Jeffrey chose not to accept the invitation, the incident sparked something within him, and after 9 years, his repressed desires resurfaced. In 1985, Jeffrey frequented the sauna, looking for men to satisfy his desires. When he found someone who interested him, he would invite them out for a drink. However, He would secretly put sleeping pills in their drinks. When the victim passed out, Jeffrey would lie down next to them after one of his victims was poisoned and hospitalized. Jeffrey was banned from the club he frequented. Despite this, he continued to seek abuse partners in other bars and clubs. He preferred muscular young men and did not care about their skin color or hair color. In November 1987, Jeffrey met a man named Stephen Tuomi, a dancer and waiter from Michigan. They fell in love and decided to spend some time alone together. They rented a room at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Jeffrey offered Stephen a cocktail that had been spiked with sleeping pills. When Jeffrey woke up the next morning, he found bruises on Stephen Tuomi's forearms and chest, along with blood coming from his mouth. Jeffrey did not remember killing Stephen and could not believe it had happened. However, he was in the same room as the corpse, which prompted him to quickly leave the hotel, cross the street, and buy a suitcase. He returned to the hotel, placed Stephen's body in the suitcase, paid the bill in the lobby, and called a taxi. A hotel employee helped Jeffrey carry the suitcase, which was so heavy that the employee jokingly asked if there was a body inside. Jeffrey replied, "Yes," and they both laughed. Unaware that the employee was helping to dispose of a body, Jeffrey then went to his grandmother's house with the suitcase and secretly took it to the basement. He began to process Stephen Tuomi's body. He placed it in trash bags and then moved the bags containing the body into the trash. Several months later, Stephen Tuomi's relatives filed a missing persons report after he was last seen the night he met Jeffrey while working as a waiter, although police initially believed that Stephen had simply left. His family did not accept this explanation. They had been unable to contact him, and his belongings were still in his house. However, the investigation stalled, and there was no explanation for Stephen Tuomi's disappearance. After not being held accountable for his actions, Jeffrey increasingly embraced his dark desires and became a serial killer over the next 5 years. He committed multiple murders on his free nights and weekends. After 3 months of searching for new victims, Jeffrey met a 14-year-old boy at a bus stop near a club. Jeffrey approached the boy and offered to pay him $50 to sleep with him. And unfortunately, the boy accepted the offer. They took the bus to Jeffrey's grandmother's house, where she was sleeping. While they went down to the basement, there, Jeffrey drugged the boy and then strangled him. He became more perverted, abusing the boy while he was dead. As the body began to decompose, Jeffrey treated it like those of his previous victims. He began to dispose of the body of James Dox Tater. He packed the body in plastic bags and threw it in the trash. The victim's name was James Dox Tater, according to the Tampa Bay Times. James had run away from home 2 days earlier to escape his abusive stepfather, although his mother filed a complaint. Police showed little interest in finding him. Jeffrey's fourth victim was Richard Guerrero, a 22-year-old Hispanic man. They met outside a gay bar called Phoenix. Jeffrey lured Richard to his grandmother's house, promising to pay him to spend the night in the basement. Jeffrey drugged Richard with sleeping pills, then strangled him with a leather strap and began abusing him after he was dead. After satisfying his desires, Jeffrey put the body parts in garbage bags, which were picked up by a garbage service the next day. Richard's family urged the police to investigate his disappearance, but the officers believed he had left home voluntarily. However, Richard's sister believed otherwise and convinced her relatives to hire a private investigator. Richard's father, who worked at a golf course, spent all his savings on the investigator. But it turned out that the investigator was a fraud. Meanwhile, Richard's mother prayed daily for his safe return. Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out because she was fed up with him. He was no longer the grandson she used to go to church with. His drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the stench from the basement and garage were too much for her to bear. As a result, Jeffrey had to find a new place to live. He rented a small apartment where he stayed for a while as he prepared for his next victim. Jeffrey then found his fifth potential victim, a 13-year-old boy who came to his apartment. They met on the street, where Jeffrey offered to pay the boy in exchange for allowing him to take pictures. However, when Jeffrey tried to touch the boy got scared and ran away. The 13-year-old then informed his parents about the incident, and they reported it to the police. As a result, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with harassment. He received a 1-year sentence at the Milwaukee Correctional Center. Although he was allowed to leave during the day to go to work, he was required to return to the facility at night, just days before his sentence began. Jeffrey met his 6th victim, a 24-year-old man named Anthony Sears. On March 25, 1989, Jeffrey and Anthony met at a bar, and when the bar closed, they decided to spend the night together. They could not go to Anthony's house because his girlfriend was there. Jeffrey asked a friend to drive them to his grandmother's house. When they arrived, he took Anthony to the basement and committed his usual act. However, this time was different. After disposing of the body, he put it in several different garbage bags. Some of Anthony's remains he threw in the trash, while others he kept in his locker at work. During Jeffrey's trial, his lawyer successfully reduced his sentence to just 10 months in a rehabilitation center. Jeffrey's father wrote to the judge, asking that Jeffrey be allowed to attend an alcohol treatment program while incarcerated. However, the judge received the letter too late, and Jeffrey was released without undergoing any rehabilitation. After his release, Jeffrey upgraded the security in his apartment by installing cameras and an alarm system. On June 24, 1990, Jeffrey went on a killing spree while at one of his favorite bars. He noticed a man named Raymond Smith. Jeffrey drugged Raymond and abused him before killing him. Just a month after killing Raymond, Jeffrey targeted another victim, 27-year-old Edward Smith. Edward was lured in with an offer of $100 to have his picture taken. With Jeffrey pretending to be a photographer, Edward was last seen alive talking to Jeffrey at a club. In September 1990, Jeffrey murdered his 8th victim, 22-year-old Ernest Miller. Ernest was attractive and healthy, and he worked as a dancer. He agreed to pose for photos in Jeffrey's apartment for $50, which put him in a dangerous situation. Jeffrey followed his usual pattern, plied Ernest with a mixture of alcohol and strong drugs. And this time, however, Ernest woke up before Jeffrey could strangle him. Resulting in a struggle, Jeffrey attacked Ernest with a knife. After killing him, Jeffrey disposed of the body as he had done with his other victims. But this time, he took a more disturbing step. Not only did he handling of the body, he also put it in the freezer for later use. The foul smell emanating from Jeffrey's apartment caused complaints from neighbors. To explain the smell, Jeffrey claimed that his meat refrigerator had broken down. To solve the problem, he bought a large plastic barrel and filled it with acid to destroy the body parts. Although he was able to remove some of the evidence, the smell remained. It seemed that Jeffrey did not care about the complaints from the neighbors. On September 24, 1990, Jeffrey continued his killing spree, targeting David Thomas, a 22-year-old man whom he had met at the Grand Avenue Mall. Jeffrey convinced David to return to his apartment for a few drinks, offering additional money if he posed for a photo. After giving David a drink laced with sedatives, Jeffrey found himself not attracted to him, but was afraid David would be angry when he found out he was drugged. As a result, Jeffrey strangled him. He took photos of handling of the body disposal and kept those photos for unknown reasons. Jeffrey stopped killing for 4 months. He met his next victim in February 1991. This victim, his 10th, was 17-year-old Curtis Straughter. Curtis had just lost his job as a nurse and was looking forward to becoming a model and attending college. They met at a bus stop, tragically. This was not the end of Jeffrey's list of victims. Just 2 months later, he met Errol Lindsay, a 19-year-old boy who was also lured by the promise of money to take pictures. The next victim was 31-year-old Tony Hughes. Tony, who had lost his hearing as a child due to medication, was cheerful and sociable. He loved to dance and made friends easily. Tony was last seen on May 24, 1991, at a club. That night, Jeffrey invited him to his house where he continued his killing spree. Unfortunately, Tony's body was left in Jeffrey's apartment for several days before being dumped in a dumpster on May 26, 1991. A tragic chapter unfolded when Jeffrey met Conorak Synthesomphone, a 14-year-old Laotian teenager. Conorak was the younger brother of a previous victim who had escaped from Jeffrey. The situation was heartbreaking. Conorak had accepted money from Jeffrey to help his family, who was struggling financially and faced challenges due to their limited English skills. Conorak had been drugged by Jeffrey. After ensuring that Conorak was unconscious, Jeffrey left to buy alcohol, planning to strangle him upon his return. However, Conorak regained consciousness and escaped from the apartment. He wandered the streets until he encountered two girls, who were the nieces of Jeffrey Dahmer's next-door neighbor. The girls saw Conorak, who was injured, and they called 911 for help. The police, along with paramedics, rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found Conorak lying in the middle of the road. They picked him up and placed him in a nearby building. When they began asking him questions, Jeffrey turned around, claiming that Conorak was his boyfriend, with whom he had just had a fight, and that he had been drinking heavily. The police accepted Jeffrey's explanation. The two girls begged the police to check Jeffrey's identification, but they refused. They urged the officers to listen to them. Pointing out the bruises and cuts on Conorak's body, the girls insisted that they knew the boy and that he was definitely a minor. The officers rudely told the girls to be quiet and even threatened to arrest them for trying to help Conorak. Had the officers checked Jeffrey's identification, they would have discovered that he was on mandatory parole for a previous conviction for molesting Conorak's brother. Instead, both officers assisted Jeffrey in taking Conorak back to his apartment, and one officer even placed him on the sofa. Once inside the apartment, the officers detected a foul odor, which Jeffrey explained was from a broken refrigerator filled with rotting meat that he had not disposed of. Surprisingly, the officers did not find anything suspicious. Jeffrey even showed them pictures of Conorak that he had taken earlier. Another alarming detail that the police overlooked was the body of Tony Hughes in the bedroom. The police left the scene, but the two girls called them back to check if they needed to identify themselves as witnesses. Unfortunately, the police dismissed their concerns, claiming it was just a disagreement between two adult partners. When Jeffrey was left alone with Conorak, he decided to inject hydrochloric acid into the boy's head. He did this to create a zombie. He had always dreamed of having a companion who would obey his every command without question. These experiments ultimately led to Conorak's death. Jeffrey then handling of the body. Conorak's, the next victim added to Jeffrey's list, was 20-year-old Matt Turner, whom he met at a bus stop. Matt accepted Jeffrey's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot at his apartment. Jeffrey drugged, strangled, and handling of the body Matt's. On July 5, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger became Jeffrey's victim. They met at a bar in Chicago, and Jeremiah went to Jeffrey's apartment with the promise of spending the weekend with him. Jeffrey then drugged Jeremiah and injected boiling water into his skull twice, causing him to fall into a coma and die 2 days later. Oliver Lacey, a 23-year-old athlete, accepted an offer for a photo shoot for money and accompanied Jeffrey to his apartment. There, Lacey and Jeffrey engage in intimate activities. Just 4 days later, on July 19, Jeffrey lured 25-year-old Joseph Bradehoff to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and laid out on Jeffrey's bed, covered with a sheet. For 2 days, on July 21, Jeffrey began handling of the body Joseph's. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey approached a group of 3 friends at a bar while they were drinking. He introduced himself as a photographer and paid $100 to anyone to pose for photos. Only one, a 32-year-old homeless man named Tracy Edwards, agreed. Jeffrey invited Tracy to his apartment and mixed him a cocktail, which he offered to all of his victims. However, Tracy, being as smart as he was, noticed a strange taste in the drink and decided not to finish it. Jeffrey then attempted to be intimate with Tracy, but Tracy repeatedly refused. Eventually, Jeffrey handcuffed one of Tracy's hands, leading to a struggle. During the fight, Jeffrey grabbed a knife, but Tracy fought back, hit Jeffrey, and escaped from the apartment. On the street, Tracy spotted a police car and informed the officers about the incident. They accompanied him to Jeffrey's apartment. Jeffrey tried to prevent the police from searching his place, but it was extremely dirty, and a strong stench filled the air. While going through boxes in Jeffrey's apartment, the police discovered gruesome photos of his victims. It was clear that they were dealing with a serial killer. This was the beginning of the end for Jeffrey Dahmer. The police searched the apartment and arrested Jeffrey inside the refrigerator. They discovered numerous human body parts. In a container filled with acid, they found more human body parts. They also found photographs that not only revealed the bodies of the victims, but also documented the many abuses Jeffrey had committed against them. Jeffrey felt relieved that he no longer had to hide such a secret that he had kept for so many years. When he realized that he would have to face the consequences of his actions, he chose to confess everything. His confession took 6 weeks to complete and spanned 159 pages, detailing every aspect of his crimes, from his first murder to his last victim. Jeffrey explained that at first, he just wanted to lie next to the men he had kidnapped. But over time, his desires became increasingly horrific. He admitted that the only way to keep his victims with him forever was to kill them. Jeffrey Dahmer claimed that he did not want to kill. Instead, he wanted a zombie-like companion that he could control indefinitely. Psychologists who worked with Jeffrey concluded that his motive was not abuse, but a desire for control. After Jeffrey's detailed confession, the court no longer had to prove his guilt. It only needed to determine his sanity. At the time, Wisconsin did not have the death penalty. If he were found insane, he would have been committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. Although there was a possibility that he could be released in the future, the trial began on January 30, 1992, due to the serious nature of the case. Many security measures were taken in the courtroom, including the installation of bulletproof glass throughout the 2-week trial. Jeffrey sat silently, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. Jeffrey's defense strategy was simple. They did not try to argue that he was not guilty of murder. Instead, the defense sought to have him hospitalized for treatment. They argued that he needed psychological and psychiatric help, asserting that normal people do not commit such heinous acts. The prosecution, in contrast, argued that, under Wisconsin law, a person who remembers his actions and understands what they have done should be considered sane. A few days later, a verdict was reached. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional life sentence for a 1978 murder, bringing the total to 16 life sentences. Jeffrey expressed deep remorse for the pain he had caused the families of his victims and acknowledged their anger toward him. He was then sent to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. During his time in prison, Jeffrey rediscovered his faith in God. Recalling the times he had gone to church with his grandmother, he asked a local priest to baptize him, and the priest agreed. On July 3, 1994, a fellow inmate, Osvaldo DeRuthi, attacked Jeffrey, who was hospitalized but survived then. In November of that year, another inmate, Christopher Scarver, who was also serving a life sentence, attacked him. Christopher had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Christopher disliked Jeffrey, who described himself as religious, a characterization that Christopher found insincere. In November, Christopher, Jeffrey, and another inmate, Jesse Anderson, who was serving time for murdering his wife, cleaned the inmate gym. They were also required to clean the locker room and restrooms used after gym class when they were left unsupervised. Christopher seized the opportunity to carry out his dangerous plan to attack both Jeffrey and Jesse. First, he followed Jeffrey into the locker room, where Jeffrey was cleaning. He took a steel bar from the weight room and struck Jeffrey in the head several times. He then attacked Jesse in the same manner. Afterward, he left the gym and called security. Both Jeffrey and Jesse were taken to the hospital, but Jeffrey died en route. His death was confirmed upon arrival at the hospital. Jesse remained in a coma for 2 days before being taken off life support. In accordance with Jeffrey's wishes, his body was cremated, and his ashes were divided among his parents. When details of Jeffrey's crimes became public, protests erupted, focused on the fact that 2 police officers who handed over a boy named Konarak Synthesomphone to Jeffrey were not prosecuted. The 2 police officers did not check the identity of the boy or Jeffrey and did not search Jeffrey's apartment. After the trial, the 2 police officers involved were suspended from duty. They later appealed the dismissal, and the judge ruled in their favor, and awarding each $55 in compensation after being reinstated. Both officers resumed their careers. Additionally, after the investigation was completed, the building where Jeffrey Dahmer lived was demolished in the hope of helping people forget the horrific events that occurred there. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Joanne Witt. Joanne Witt is a single mother and engineer who raised her daughter, Tyler, on her own during a challenging teenage period filled with rebellion. Despite the hardships, Joanne loved Tyler deeply and tried her best to give her a better life. However, Tyler's rebellion came to a head when she was 14, leading to a devastating tragedy. Joanne suffered from lupus, an autoimmune disease, which made it difficult for her to form healthy relationships with men. Despite this, she had a strong desire to become a mother. She chose to undergo artificial insemination. Despite her family's objections due to concerns about genetics, nevertheless, Joanne went ahead with the procedure. Although her pregnancy was difficult, she eventually gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Tyler. Tyler's struggles began in childhood. She was often naughty, short-tempered, and refused to go to kindergarten, forcing Joanne, who had a lot of work to do, to deal with the situation. One day, when Tyler was 5, she threw another tantrum, screaming and refusing to go to kindergarten. Frustrated, Joanne lost her temper and hit Tyler. A staff member at the kindergarten witnessed the incident and reported it as abuse, prompting an investigation by Child Protective Services. During the investigation, Joanne admitted to hitting Tyler in a fit of anger and expressed remorse for her actions. As a result, Tyler was temporarily placed in the care of Joanne's parents. This situation was extremely difficult for Joanne, who felt alone. She loved her daughter deeply and wanted to reunite with her, so she decided to take parenting classes. Joanne's determination eventually paid off, and after 6 months, she regained custody of Tyler. Their relationship began to improve, and Tyler started to understand and respect her mother. Friends and family noticed their growing closeness. Despite these improvements, Tyler still had occasional tantrums. Joanne did her best to provide a comfortable and prosperous life for her daughter, Tyler. They lived in a 5-bedroom house with a pool in El Dorado Hills, an affluent suburb of California. Tyler had many experiences, including frequent trips to Mexico and Jamaica. However, this period of prosperity did not last long. As Tyler entered her teens, she became increasingly aggressive, leading to serious conflicts between her and Joanne. Although there is no evidence that Joanne was cruel, people close to the family knew that Tyler often insulted her mother. She accused Joanne of being an alcoholic and believed her mother was useless because of her drinking. In fact, there is no evidence that Joanne was an alcoholic. No one ever saw her drunk. She suffered from lupus, which made her face flush and caused her pain when she took medication. A glass of wine on the weekend helped her cope with these difficulties. Unfortunately, it was during these times that Tyler said the harshest things about her mother. When Tyler was 12, she began running away from home, and her academic performance dropped significantly. One day, after starting a fight, Tyler hit her mother several times. Tyler then called the police and tried to accuse her mother of abuse and alcoholism. However, Tyler had no visible injuries, while Joanne had multiple injuries to her face, which made Tyler's testimony seem unreliable. The police found no evidence of Tyler's abuse or Joanne's alcoholism, leading them to close the case in late 2008. Tyler then met an older boy named Stephen Paul Culver, and they quickly connected. Like Tyler, Stephen lived in El Dorado Hills. He was generally a nice guy, and Tyler responded positively to him. Stephen was a college student who aspired to be a math teacher and worked part-time at a coffee shop. He was not considered cruel or dangerous. Instead, he was seen as a bit eccentric. Tyler met Stephen at the coffee shop where he worked, and they became friends after a few months. Their friendship developed into a romantic relationship. Tyler often complained to Stephen about her mother, whom she described as an alcoholic and accused of abusing her for years. At the time, Stephen was living with his father, but Tyler wanted to be closer to Stephen. Tyler convinced her mother to give Stephen a room in their house. At that time, Joanne had met Stephen several times and thought he was a nice guy. However, she was concerned about their age difference, as he was 5 years older than Tyler, and she was uncomfortable with having a man living in their house. Tyler's family and relatives were strongly against the idea, but Tyler assured her mother that Stephen was not a threat and that they were like siblings. Joanne did not know that this was a lie. Eventually, Joanne agreed to let Stephen move in. Pretending he was renting a room, he began paying Joanne $500 a month, a small amount that helped supplement the family budget. During the day, he studied and worked, and in the evenings, he helped with housework, tutored Tyler in math, and had dinner with them. Although the arrangement seemed strange, Joanne realized that it was beneficial for her daughter, and she appreciated the extra help around the house. Stephen officially moved into their home in 2009, by which time he had formed a close relationship with Tyler. Joanne did not know about their relationship in front of her. The two teenagers acted like siblings, successfully hiding their romance. Despite Joanne's suspicions, Tyler was able to convince her mother that they were just friends. During this time, Tyler's diary contained interesting entries about her boyfriend, expressing that they were always together, had no problems, and could be intimate whenever they wanted. She declared her love for him, asserting that nothing could come between them, despite constant arguments with her mother. These never escalated into violence. Tyler's academic performance remained poor. She frequently broke curfew, smoked, and wrote more in her diary. Joanne, sensing potential danger, wrote in her diary that she feared for her daughter's safety. Her concerns were well-founded, as Tyler had a history of self-harm during this time. Stephen acted responsibly, noticing that Tyler was having trouble in school. He tried to persuade her not to skip classes and offered to help her with her studies, especially in math. However, despite his support, her relationship with Stephen had a negative impact on her. Tyler became obsessed with him and lost interest in her studies. On May 13, 2009, 47-year-old Joanne returned home and went into the utility room. There, she discovered lubricant, some toys, and a small amount of marijuana. Since Stephen kept his belongings in that room, the items were likely his. Joanne asked Stephen about the marijuana, and he claimed he did not use it and had kept it at the request of a friend. Joanne asked him to remove everything from the house, and he agreed to do so. The next day, Joanne came home early after work to investigate her growing suspicions. She was shocked to find Tyler and Stephen being intimate. Joanne was stunned to realize that her daughter and Stephen had been lying to her all along. Stephen was worried about going to jail and asked Tyler not to engage in such activities. Joanne remained calm and invited Stephen to talk to her at the park later. Without Tyler present during the conversation, Stephen revealed that he had been intimate with Tyler before moving into their house. The mother was shocked by this revelation, but Joanne decided not to report Stephen to the police. Instead, she suggested that he move out and never contact Tyler again. Stephen agreed and asked for more time to find a new place to live and pack his belongings. The family became very tense when Tyler learned that Stephen would be moving out soon. Tyler became angry with her mother and yelled in response. Joanne pressured Stephen to leave quickly, After 2 days, Stephen moved out. Joanne brought 2 strong men from her workplace to help move Stephen's belongings to the street. They also spoke to Stephen privately. The men told him that he was behaving poorly and warned him to stay away from Tyler or face serious consequences. Stephen agreed to the warning and moved in with friends. But he and Tyler continued to see each other secretly. Now planning to run away together, Joanne was not naive, so she had her concerns. In early June, she found her daughter's diary and read it. What worried Joanne most was that Tyler was intimate with Stephen without using contraception, putting her at risk of becoming pregnant. Joanne realized that her daughter was infatuated with Stephen, and the diary indicated that Tyler's mental health was deteriorating. The diary entries included disturbing fantasies about Joanne being involved in a tragic accident, suggesting that Tyler wanted to escape from her mother. This worried Joanne. She decided to report Tyler's relationship with Stephen to the police. When the police arrived and spoke to Tyler, she denied having a romantic relationship, claiming that her mother had misunderstood the situation. Tyler explained that she was just changing clothes in Stephen's room when her mother came in. However, Joanne provided the police with a diary that contained evidence of inappropriate intimacy. She showed the police a towel from Tyler's bed, thinking it might have traces of Stephen's DNA. When Tyler discovered this, they got into a loud argument that was heard by Joanne's neighbors. During the argument, Joanne called the police twice, claiming that her daughter was being aggressive. Patrol officers arrived and took Tyler to the station for questioning, but they released her after a few hours. Meanwhile, Joanne sought psychotherapy for her daughter, concerned that she might have serious mental health issues due to substance abuse. The situation seemed to have calmed down. Eventually, Tyler settled down, and her mother watched over her for the next few days. Tyler kept calling Stephen because she missed him, but due to pressure from the police, she was reluctant to talk to him. Tyler complained of stomach pains, loss of appetite, and migraines. She frequently asked to meet, hoping to gain sympathy. Gradually, Stephen agreed to meet her during the summer school holidays. He would sometimes pick her up, and they would spend time together in his car. When Joanne relaxed her surveillance of Tyler, Stephen started visiting his lover while Joanne was at work. Stephen would sneak through the fence to avoid being seen by the security cameras at the entrance. They continued to be intimate, but the only change in their relationship was how often they could see each other. They could only be together when Tyler's mother was not home, which frustrated Tyler more than ever. She blamed her mother for ruining her happy relationship and forbade them from seeing each other. Tyler also visited Stephen under the pretext of meeting friends, suspecting that their relationship was still ongoing. Her mother went to the police again. The girl was questioned, but she denied her relationship with Stephen. He also denied the relationship during questioning, with no evidence to support these claims. The couple was released once again on June 11, 2009. Joanne returned home from work and took her daughter, Tyler, to the store, exhausted by their recent arguments. Joanne wanted to mend their relationship. She apologized to Tyler for reading her diary and expressed sympathy for her daughter's feelings. To cheer her up, Joanne bought Tyler her favorite candy and ice cream, and Tyler seemed pleased with their reconciliation. After returning home, Joanne went straight to her room while Tyler played video games until 10 p.m. Unfortunately, a tragic event occurred that night. Joanne was home alone, so no one immediately noticed that she was missing when she did not show up for work the next day, June 12. Her absence did not immediately raise any alarms. Her co-workers thought she might be dealing with issues related to her daughter and assumed she was busy. Joanne's boss tried to contact her, but she did not answer her calls. Her co-workers later recalled that she had mentioned plans to go on a trip with Tyler, so they believed she was away and decided to wait until Monday to find out more. On Monday, June 15, when she still did not show up for work, her co-worker began trying to contact Joanne. She did not answer her phone. So later in the day, he contacted the police to request a welfare check. In the evening, the police went to her home but were unable to gain entry because no one answered the door. The officers then contacted Joanne's relatives for assistance. They were able to reach her father, who arrived in time and used a spare key to open the door. Inside, they found Joanne lying on the bed, dead for several days. The attacker had left the air conditioning running to slow the body's decomposition. The victim was identified by her father as Joanne. Forensic experts arrived at the scene to collect evidence, while the police began interviewing neighbors and family members. Everyone agreed that Joanne was a kind person with no enemies, but they noted her troubled relationship with her daughter, which had escalated into physical altercations. Police discovered that, shortly before her death, Joanne had reported her daughter's boyfriend to the police. This information aroused suspicion, making Tyler and her boyfriend, Stephen, the prime suspects in the case. As the investigation progressed, the couple was placed on the wanted list. The community was shocked by the murder, and the media reported extensively on Joanne's case. Joanne's co-workers reported that, on her last day of work, she left early to talk to her daughter and comfort her. Joanne remained optimistic about the situation, hoping, until the end, that she could control her daughter's rebellious behavior and that everything would be okay. On June 17, 2009, Stephen and Tyler were walking near a shopping mall in San Francisco when one of the patrol officers recognized them and arrested them. In their hotel room, the police discovered a suicide note, a DVD, and the poison they planned to use. Stephen and Tyler were then taken to Sacramento, where they were questioned separately. At first, the couple refused to talk and denied any involvement in the murder. They appeared confused about the situation and the charges against them. When they learned of the incident, they pretended to be surprised, and Tyler began to cry. Although no tears were shed, Stephen and Tyler were later charged and tried as adults. Despite their age, Tyler, who was only 14 at the time of the massacre, could face life in prison without parole if convicted of first-degree murder under state law. As the investigation progressed, the two shared their stories, which differed greatly. Tyler claimed that the night before the murder, she and her mother made up and then went to sleep in their separate rooms. She played video games until 10 p.m. before going to bed. Tyler went into her mother's room and found her asleep. She noticed a glass of wine on the bedside table and that the TV was on, which angered her. Tyler said that her mother had promised to stop drinking earlier, but had not kept her promise. Furious, Tyler called her boyfriend and told him that it was time to put her plan into action. She planned to mix sleeping pills with alcohol for her mother to drink. However, she did not have the medication available and had to wait for Stephen to finish his shift at 10 p.m. and bring it to her house later. When Stephen parked near the backyard fence and tried to call Tyler, her mother had woken up. Tyler then asked him to wait for about 20 minutes. He ended up waiting for nearly 40 minutes because Tyler did not respond to his calls or messages on various apps. Tyler then called Stephen back. Tyler asked him to come into the house, making it clear that he should use the main entrance, which was quite unusual since he usually came in through the fence to avoid being seen. He spent some time playing with the family dogs in the yard until Tyler invited him in. However, Tyler and Stephen have different accounts of what happened next. Tyler said that her boyfriend grabbed a knife and attacked her mother as soon as he entered the house. They had originally planned to do it together, but Tyler panicked, couldn't go through with it, and ran into the bathroom. There, she covered her ears to block out her mother's screams and the chaos outside. Meanwhile, Stephen tried to convince the police that Tyler had opened the door for him while covered in blood, claiming that's when she attacked her mother. Tyler packed up her things and turned on the TV in her mother's room to make it seem like someone was home. She also turned on the air conditioning to help slow the body's decomposition. Tyler closed all the windows and pulled the curtains, and with Stephen's help, they burned the bloody clothes in the fireplace. Tyler then showered and changed into new clothes. They then went to a nearby parking lot to rest and regain their strength before planning their escape. They had planned a trip to San Francisco afterward. They met their mutual friend, Matthew, and told him they were leaving. But initially, withheld details about their destination and the reason for their trip, however. By the end of the conversation, they chose to reveal the truth to Matthew. This confession later became crucial evidence against them. Stephen confessed to Matthew that he had attacked Joanne in her neck and abdomen. However, the medical examiner found no injuries to her abdomen. Stephen later claimed that he had lied to protect his girlfriend before their arrest. The couple attempted to carry out a plan to die in the hills. They spent time visiting various locations before deciding to end their lives when police discovered Joanne's body. Stephen and Tyler had taken poison, however, the next morning. Stephen felt completely fine, while Tyler only had a mild stomachache. After their initial approach failed, they began exploring other methods, but none worked until the pair were arrested. Both suspects blamed each other for the murder. The case was complex, making it difficult to solve. Forensic scientists discovered traces of DNA under Joanne's fingernails. Possibly from a struggle, samples were sent for analysis, but the results were inconclusive. The owner of the DNA particles could not be identified, and at that time, DNA testing was not advanced enough to confirm that it was male DNA. Separate trials were scheduled for Tyler and Stephen, and they were held without bail. In September 2010, Tyler, on the advice of her attorney, chose to accept a plea deal from the prosecutor. By that time, she had already served more than a year in prison, which influenced her decision. Tyler agreed to testify against Stephen, helping to establish his first-degree murder conviction. While she would likely face a second-degree murder charge, she was also expected to testify in the abuse case against Stephen. Tyler entered into a plea agreement on September 17, 2010, and Stephen's trial began on May 17, 2011. Stephen's defense argued that he never threatened Joanne. They had a good relationship at first, as her mother treated him like a son when she believed he and her daughter were just friends. Their relationship soured after she learned of their romantic involvement. The defense contended that the daughter was responsible for the conflicts, claiming that she invited Stephen to live with them. Convinced her mother to accept him, they argued that Stephen always tried to avoid conflict and violence. The defense stated that he had worked hard to improve his life until he met Tyler, who shattered his peace and framed him for murder. In his testimony, Stephen said that when he met Tyler, she claimed to be several years older than she actually was, and that she also appeared older. Stephen asserted that Tyler had deceived everyone, including him. Most importantly, Stephen denied killing Joanne. He said that when he entered the house, Tyler was covered in blood. Tyler gave him a knife to clean, which resulted in his fingerprints being found on the murder weapon. Stephen asserted that he had never touched Joanne. He believed that his only wrongdoing was failing to stop Tyler from planning, helping her escape, and failing to call the police. The defense argued that Tyler may have influenced the murder because she was a skilled manipulator and had a history of problematic behavior, especially toward Joanne and others. Stephen only wanted to protect her, so he confessed in front of his friends. Unaware of the severity of the situation, they had agreed to end their lives anyway. The defense also presented Tyler's diary, in which she expressed her feelings about her mother's death, including threats and detailed descriptions of violence. This demonstrated her deliberate intent. Joanne's father confirmed that his daughter cared deeply for Tyler and did everything she could to ensure her safety. However, instead of appreciating this, Tyler became increasingly defiant, which escalated over time. Many people testified that what Joanne's father said was true, and witnesses confirmed Tyler's aggressive behavior. One day, a family friend witnessed Tyler slap her mother in the face, but Joanne did not react. This made her so anxious that she often cried alone and tried to relieve her sadness by drinking. Although many others insisted that she was not an alcoholic because she knew when to stop. During the trial, Matthew, a close friend of the couple, revealed that they had confessed to attacking Joanne. Matthew mentioned a wound to Joanne's abdomen that was allegedly caused by Stephen, but forensic experts could not find any such wounds. This allowed the defense to emphasize Stephen's dishonesty in an attempt to protect his loved one. After the plea deal, Tyler testified against Stephen in court. She said that she and Stephen had gone to her mother's room with knives, but at the last minute, she got scared and hid to avoid hearing any of her mother's screams, which meant she blamed her boyfriend. Stephen's lawyers argued that Tyler's testimony was more about reducing her own sentence than seeking justice as part of her plea agreement. She was supposed to help the police find the murder weapon. The last time Matthew saw the knife, the couple showed it to him and explained what happened before they left for San Francisco. They claimed to have thrown it into a storm drain, but the police did not find it. It is possible the knife was washed away by the water. The prosecution claimed that male DNA was found under Joanne's fingernails, while there was no female DNA, however. Defense attorneys and an expert argued that the DNA could have been there due to normal interactions with any other man, suggesting that the evidence did not conclusively prove guilt. The prosecutor believed Stephen was the killer and supported this claim by highlighting his antisocial behavior, difficulty interacting with others, lack of friends, fondness for cold weapons, and his knife collection. Additionally, a diary belonging to Stephen was discovered, which contained entries about his deep love for Tyler and his willingness to do anything for her. The prosecutor argued that these sentiments could imply murderous intent. On June 14, 2011, the jury began deliberations, which lasted several hours. Stephen Paul Culver was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Joanne Witt. He broke down in tears as he left the courthouse. Joanne's father was upset that his granddaughter described Joanne as an alcoholic who would incite violence against her own child, in his view. This description did not reflect the truth. Joanne had devoted her life to ensuring Tyler's happiness instead of receiving gratitude. She suffered a tragic fate. On August 12, 2011, the judge announced the verdict. Stephen Paul Culver was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Tyler Witt pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, waived his right to a jury trial, and waived his right to appeal. Tyler Witt was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Christopher Wilder. Some criminals leave a lasting mark on the criminal world, not only due to their brutality, but also because of the sophisticated methods they use to cover up their crimes. Today's story is about a series of mysterious murders that once shook America. Where dreams become nightmares, Elizabeth Kenyon, a 23-year-old aspiring model, had big dreams. She competed as a finalist in a beauty pageant in Florida, unfortunately. Her beautiful journey was tragically cut short on March 5, 1984. Elizabeth disappeared without a trace. Worried, her parents immediately contacted the Miami police to report her missing. However, as is often the case, the authorities downplayed their concerns. Claiming there was no need to worry yet, they suggested Elizabeth might be out celebrating her pageant success with friends or a boyfriend. The police advised the family to wait 24 hours before filing an official missing persons report. But her parents knew this wasn't like Elizabeth. She wasn't the type to party and always made sure to inform others of her plans. A day passed, but the police still made no move to solve her disappearance. Her mother, however, had a strong feeling that something terrible had happened to her daughter. Ultimately, her parents decided to hire a private investigator, together with Elizabeth's parents. The detective visited the apartment Elizabeth had been renting, hoping to uncover any clues. After searching the apartment, they found two notable items: an address book and a photo album. The album contained several pictures of Elizabeth's friends, while a small note inside detailed her schedule for the day she went missing. The note mentioned a planned meeting with a photographer at a specific address. When the investigator followed up on the lead, The building concierge confirmed seeing Elizabeth on the day she disappeared. She had been accompanied by a man. The detective soon discovered that the man she was scheduled to meet was Christopher Wilder. A 38-year-old who had been in a relationship with Elizabeth. Christopher had even proposed to her. But Elizabeth had declined, citing concerns about their age difference. On March 11, just 6 days after Elizabeth went missing, the detective contacted Christopher to ask him some questions about her disappearance. Christopher claimed he had no idea where Elizabeth might be. The detective then arranged an in-person meeting with Christopher. During their calm conversation, Christopher showed the detective some of his photography. Nothing incriminating or suspicious surfaced, except for one particular photo of Elizabeth. In the image, she appeared visibly frightened, which the seasoned detective found unusual. Christopher explained that they had only done a short photo session on the day in question, after which Elizabeth supposedly left with an unidentified man. Still, the detective decided to investigate Christopher further. Christopher Wilder was born on March 13, 1945, in Sydney, New South Wales, to an Australian mother, June Wilder, and an American father, Coley Chapman Wilder. Who was a naval officer, Christopher was the oldest of 4 sons. His life was challenging from the start. Christopher was nearly stillborn and is believed to have nearly drowned in a swimming pool at the age of 2. These incidents were only the beginning of his troubled life. On January 4, 1963, when Christopher was 17, he and 2 friends had abused and assaulted a 13-year-old girl at a quarry, while all 3 denied involvement. Christopher was sentenced to probation. He later claimed that he underwent electroshock therapy as part of a rehabilitation program. Some experts speculated that this treatment could have been a traumatic experience, potentially worsening his mental state and contributing to his later violent behavior. However, no concrete evidence of this therapy has ever been found. It's also possible that Christopher fabricated this story to justify his actions. A journalist even suggested that another claim about nearly drowning in a swimming pool was also false. As Christopher's parents did not confirm it, these accounts may have been Christopher's attempts to gain sympathy. In 1968, Christopher got married, but his wife left him after just 1 week. The incident occurred after Christopher was arrested on suspicion of multiple abuse offenses at Manly Beach, Australia, following their divorce. His ex-wife informed the authorities that she believed Christopher had attempted to seduce her mother and another relative shortly after their marriage. She also discovered photographs of women in lingerie in his work briefcase and car, suggesting an obsessive fixation on women. Additionally, she suspected that he had twice attempted to strangle her during intimate moments, possibly with the intent to kill her in November of the same year. Christopher used the sensitive photos to blackmail a nursing student in Australia into having intimate relations with him, although the woman reported the incident to the police. The case was dropped because she refused to testify later. She revealed that her fear of retaliation from Christopher, whom she already perceived as unstable, had prevented her from coming forward. After emigrating to the United States, Christopher began a new chapter in his life, one that would eventually lead to his dark crimes. A resourceful, he entered the real estate business and achieved notable success, amassing a substantial fortune. With his newfound wealth, he purchased a luxurious waterfront mansion in the prestigious Boynton Beach area, located 25 miles south of Palm Beach. Along with a Porsche 911 and a boat, Christopher also developed a passion for car racing, participating in the Miami Grand Prix and embracing an extravagant lifestyle. During this period, he frequently vacationed in Hawaii and the Bahamas. It was also during this time that he developed a strong interest in photography. He invested in high-end photography equipment to enhance the quality of his work and even converted a room in his mansion into a darkroom to fully immerse himself in the hobby. However, he was driven by other impulses, vastly different from art, between 1971 and 1975. Christopher repeatedly became the focus of investigations related to abuse offenses on one occasion. He lured a young woman into his pickup truck under the pretense of photographing her for a modeling agency. Of course, this was a lie. And the girl became a victim of brutal abuse. Despite numerous allegations from his victims, Christopher was never held accountable for his crimes. In 1977, a psychiatrist who evaluated him concluded that he was mentally ill. The psychiatrist considered him dangerous, recommended that he remain under constant medical supervision and participate in a specialized treatment program, according to the expert. Christopher harbored an obsessive desire to dominate women, degrade them to the level of slaves, and inflict pain and injuries. However, the psychiatrist's conclusions did not result in any legal consequences, and Christopher was acquitted by the jury on April 13, 1980. A 17-year-old girl named Carla Hendry from Beverly, Massachusetts, escaped from an attack and provided law enforcement with details about the perpetrator's vehicle. However, no action was taken. In 1982, while visiting his parents in Australia, Christopher was accused of an abuse offense involving two 15-year-old girls from Manly. He had lured them to a remote area and forced them to pose sensitively. Thankfully, the girls were not seriously harmed and were able to identify him. Leading to his arrest, Christopher's parents posted bail for him, and he was even permitted to return to Florida while awaiting his legal proceedings, which were scheduled for April 1984 during the investigation of Elizabeth's case. Authorities uncovered a connection to another case, just 7 days before Elizabeth disappeared. A 20-year-old woman named Rosario Teresa Gonzalez went missing during the Miami Grand Prix. Christopher, a racing enthusiast, had attended the event. Rosario, a model working for a marketing company, had been handing out flyers and promotional items at the event. She vanished shortly after the race. It was later revealed that she had agreed to a photography session with Christopher, who had driven off in his Porsche. The circumstances strongly suggested that Christopher was involved in the disappearances of both women. On March 12, 1984, Elizabeth's parents sought help from an FBI special agent specializing in homicide investigations at the Miami office. Frustrated by law enforcement's lack of interest in the case, the family hired a private investigator and reached out to the Miami Herald to raise public awareness about Elizabeth's disappearance, hoping to provoke a response from the suspected abductor. On March 16, 1984, the newspaper published an article claiming significant progress in the investigation. Though it did not mention Christopher by name, the article briefly described the suspect as an Australian, a race car driver, and an amateur photographer. The intention was to prompt a reaction from Christopher. Law enforcement finally began paying closer attention to these cases after the publicity surrounding them. When agents reviewed the evidence, they quickly noticed a suspicious link between the two missing women, Elizabeth and Rosario, and their scheduled photography sessions with a man named Christopher. A background check revealed that Christopher had a long history of legal issues in Australia. At the time, he was on probation for an abuse charge and awaiting a new trial. This discovery gave the FBI grounds to open a full investigation on March 20, around the same time. They received a report from Linda Grover, 19, about an attempted kidnapping Linda described being attacked by a man who tried to abduct her, seemingly intending to keep her captive or abuse her as a slave. Thankfully, she managed to escape. Her description of the attacker matched Christopher exactly. An FBI agent immediately interviewed Linda. She said, while she was working, a man approached her, complimented her appearance, and offered her a modeling opportunity, claiming to be a fashion photographer. He invited her to his car to view his portfolio. Linda declined and walked away, but the man persisted. He followed her in his car, urging her to go to a park with him for a quick photo session. Promising to pay her $25, Linda refused again and went into the store. When Linda stepped outside, the man approached her again, although he appeared friendly. She sensed a sinister presence about him that made her uncomfortable. She scanned the area for anyone who might help if needed, but the place was deserted. Christopher tried to convince her to join him for a photo shoot, opening his car to show her fashion magazines. This all occurred in broad daylight in a public setting. Suddenly, Christopher struck Linda on the head, knocking her unconscious. When Linda woke up, she was immobilized and lying in the back seat of a car. She began crying, which enraged Christopher. He stopped the car, taped her mouth shut with duct tape, and forced her into the trunk. He then drove to Glen Oaks Motel. Once there, he stuffed her into a sack. Restricting her movement entirely, Christopher glued her eyelids shut with super glue, tied her up, and abused her to hours of torture. Using a stun weapon to shock her whenever she resisted, his cruelty convinced Linda that she wouldn't survive. However, at one point, when Christopher became distracted, Linda managed to free herself and hide in the bathroom. She banged on the walls and screamed for help as loudly as she could. The noise scared Christopher, and he fled later. When an FBI agent showed Linda photographs of Christopher, she trembled and confidently identified him as her abductor. Linda eventually became a key witness in the case. However, the investigation progressed very slowly. Within a week, Linda had to leave the state out of fear for her safety. She was placed under FBI protection and relocated to a secret location. Law enforcement soon realized they were dealing with a violent and dangerous individual linked to multiple crimes. It took her more than 30 years to recover from the trauma she suffered. During that time, Linda earned a doctoral degree and frequently spoke to the media, sharing the story of her miraculous escape at the time of her abduction. Linda didn't fully comprehend how fortunate she was to survive, despite her fear. She was determined to ensure the criminal was imprisoned for a long time. Meanwhile, authorities needed more evidence to charge Christopher with the abductions of Rosario and Elizabeth. Police secured a search warrant for Christopher's home and arrived with FBI agents. They broke down the door and found the house empty. Christopher had fled days earlier. A massive manhunt was launched to locate him. Investigators thoroughly searched the house, but Christopher had meticulously cleaned it, leaving behind no fingerprints or evidence. Interviews with neighbors revealed that Christopher had disappeared immediately after the Glen Oaks Motel incident, likely realizing the police were closing in and would soon come for him. On March 23rd, in Canaveral Groves, the body of 21-year-old Teresa Ann Ferguson was found. She had last been seen at a shopping mall with a man resembling Christopher. Investigators discovered that Teresa had been beaten with a blunt object and then strangled to death. The method of the attack matched Christopher's profile, raising the victim count to 4. FBI agents concluded they were dealing with a serial killer and feared he could strike again at any moment. Immediate action was critical that same day. Alarming news arrived the day before the raid on Christopher's home. He had been seen at a local bank withdrawing a large amount of cash. This was a serious setback because it meant he now had the resources to travel across the country, pay in cash, and avoid detection with a 24-hour head start. He could already be anywhere before. On March 21, Christopher was seen in Texas, specifically in the parking lot of Lamar University in Beaumont. Witnesses reported that he was speaking with a young woman named Terry Diane Walden, a nursing student who was married and had 2 children. Christopher tried to lure her with an offer for a photo shoot, a tactic he often used. But Terry politely declined. Thankfully, he did not forcefully abduct her at that moment, sparing her life for the time being, however. This safety was short-lived. Later, at a supermarket, Christopher, essentially waiting for Terry, approached her again. He repeated his photo shoot offer. This time, in a more menacing tone, Terry refused once more. But Christopher was determined. He followed her through the store and into the parking lot, where he struck her on the head and abducted her. The FBI issued statements as they pursued this dangerous criminal, but he always seemed to stay about 2 days ahead of them. According to agents from the Miami office, a press release was issued describing Christopher's car, which he had used to kidnap Terry, unfortunately. The car was a common model, and without a license plate number, the information was not very helpful. Terry's profile was distributed across the country, but the slower communication technology of the time delayed the spread of alerts. The FBI had no choice but to follow the grim trail of bodies Christopher left behind on March 25th. At Penn Square Shopping Mall in Oklahoma City, he abducted 21-year-old Suzanne Wendy Logan. He then drove her to a motel in Newton, Kansas, the next morning. After breakfast, he took her to Milford Reservoir, where he stabbed her to death and left her body there. 2 days later, a fisherman discovered her body. The investigation revealed she had been tortured, abused, and murdered in a particularly horrific manner on March 28th. The FBI received a promising lead on Christopher when they discovered he had rented a hotel room in Colorado using a stolen credit card. This allowed authorities to track his movements. However, officers only learned about this payment the day after the room was booked. Acting quickly, all available police officers, along with FBI agents, rushed to the motel to apprehend Christopher, but he was already gone, although their efforts narrowed the gap in their pursuit to about 1 day. It provided little reassurance, as Christopher's direction of travel remained unknown. Christopher's next sighting occurred at a shopping mall in Grand Junction, Colorado, where he was seen talking to an 18-year-old woman named Cheryl Lynn Bonaventura. Witnesses later observed the two together at a diner, where they mentioned plans to travel to Las Vegas around March 31st. Christopher attacked Cheryl near the Kanab River in Utah. Her body was discovered on May 3rd. This incident led law enforcement to identify malls as his preferred locations for targeting victims. Christopher portrayed himself as a polished and credible individual, dressing in elegant suits and grooming his mustache and beard meticulously. He carried business cards, wore a large diamond ring on the pinky of his left hand, a gold Rolex watch, and a Pentax camera slung over his shoulder. Creating the image of a successful and respectable man, he used his charm and the pretense of being a professional photographer, searching for aspiring models to lure his victims, while also disarming the suspicions of security personnel and mall staff. Despite law enforcement distributing his photos and descriptions to shopping malls and supermarkets nationwide, Christopher continued moving across the country in search of new victims. On April 1st, Christopher Wilder's next victim was Michelle Lynn Korfman, a 17-year-old girl abducted at Meadows Shopping Mall in Las Vegas. Christopher had attended a photography event at the mall, where he approached Michelle and offered her an opportunity to become his first professional model. When the FBI learned about the incident and began investigating the mall, they collected photographs from event attendees, some of which showed Michelle with Christopher. Several images captured him selecting her as his target and following her. Michelle's body was discovered on May 11th, according to forensic analysis results. Her abductor had restrained and tortured her over an extended period. He sealed her mouth and eyes with superglue, abused her, and inflicted deep cuts while she was still alive. The wounds, approximately 3 centimeters deep, were not fatal, but caused her immense pain. The hunt continued. On April 4, 16-year-old Tina Marie Rizzico from California became Christopher's next victim. She had gone to a shopping mall in search of a summer job, hoping to save enough money to buy a new car to replace the old one her father had given her. At the mall, Christopher approached her, complimented her appearance, and offered her $100 in cash for a photo shoot, hoping to earn some extra money. Tina agreed. They went to a nearby park, where she willingly posed, expecting to receive her payment. However, Christopher suddenly pulled out a weapon and forced her into his car. She had no choice but to comply. Christopher drove Tina to a motel in San Diego, where she was subjected to hours of brutal torture. He cut her with a knife, electrocuted her, beat her, and alternated these horrific acts with abuse assault when Tina disappeared. The FBI issued a special bulletin and held a press conference. By this time, Christopher Wilder had become the most wanted fugitive in the United States. Tina was his 7th known victim. With at least 6 others already confirmed, Christopher's name and crimes were being discussed on television, in newspapers, and on the radio. The FBI hoped this extensive media coverage would lead to his capture. In the spring of 1984, the FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. Despite their efforts, Tina remained missing. Authorities hoped she might still be alive, but in reality, she was enduring unimaginable suffering. On the 6th day of captivity, Christopher told Tina he would set her free if she helped him lure in his next victim. Desperate to survive, Tina agreed. Christopher had already chosen his next target, Dawnette Sue Wilt, a young woman who worked part-time handing out flyers in supermarkets. He forced Tina to pretend she was looking for work in order to convince Dawnette to get into his car. The plan worked, and several witnesses reported seeing an unknown man leaving an Indiana shopping center with 2 women. The man's description matched Christopher, whose face was now widely recognized across the country, despite promising Tina her freedom. Christopher refused to release her and forced her to watch as his victims endured horrifying torture. On April 12, 1984, Christopher, along with his hostages, saw a news report in which Tina's mother pleaded for her daughter's life. This triggered a panic attack in Christopher, something that had been happening more frequently in a frantic state. He left the motel with his captives. Later, in a forest, Christopher attempted to kill Dawnette after enduring days of torture. Dawnette was so desperate that she begged him to kill her. Christopher stabbed her twice with a knife due to severe blood loss and the sedatives he had been administering. Dawnette lost consciousness, believing she was dead. Christopher abandoned her. Amazingly, Dawnette survived the nightmare. She regained consciousness, tried to make her way to the nearest road, where a driver found her and helped her. Christopher returned to the spot where he had left Dawnette to confirm her death. But when he discovered she was no longer there, he panicked. Based on Dawnette's testimony, FBI agents determined that the suspect was heading toward the Canadian border. Investigators discovered he was driving a car stolen from Terry, The vehicle was soon found abandoned. Christopher managed to escape once again. He was next spotted at a shopping center in Victor, New York, where he targeted a 30-year-old woman named Beth Elaine Dodge to steal her Pontiac Firebird, again with Tina's assistance. Christopher took Beth to the woods and killed her. He did not abuse or torture Beth. He only wanted her car. After this cold-blooded murder, Christopher unexpectedly released Tina, even giving her money so she could return home. Tina became a crucial witness, providing detailed accounts of the horrors she endured during her captivity. FBI agents learned that Christopher had friends in Canada whom he had visited periodically before his crime spree. Law enforcement was convinced he was heading to them with his newly stolen car. Christopher had gained a significant lead over the agents. Authorities believed he was already en route to the border. In response, all available police forces were mobilized, and law enforcement agencies were alerted to the threat posed by Christopher. On April 13, Christopher stopped at a service station in Colebrook, New Hampshire, near the Canadian border. 2 state police officers at the scene recognized him as a dangerous criminal from distributed bulletins. As the officers carefully observed him, Christopher noticed their presence. He ran to his car and armed himself with a weapon. One of the officers attempted to tackle him from behind, leading to a struggle in which his weapon discharged twice. The first bullet hit Christopher, penetrating his back, while the second caused a fatal chest injury. The officer accidentally attacked himself, despite suffering serious injuries. The officer survived, underwent a long recovery, and later returned to duty as a celebrated hero who had stopped a killer capable of taking more lives. During a search of Christopher's car, police discovered a copy of the book The Collector by John Fowles. The novel tells the story of a man who kidnaps and imprisons a woman in a basement, eventually leading to her death. Authorities believe Christopher was inspired by this book and saw it as a model for his crimes. The serial killer was later cremated in Florida, leaving behind an estate valued at over $7 million that same year. The court ordered taxes to be deducted from the estate, with the remaining funds distributed among the families of his victims. Several previous cases allegedly involving Christopher Wilder are also mentioned. On May 29, 1982, near a property owned by Christopher, a bag containing the skeletal remains of 17-year-old Tina Marie Beebe was discovered. Tina's sister revealed that before her disappearance, Tina had planned to attend a photo shoot after being invited by a photographer. Similarly, 20-year-old aspiring model Sherry Lynn Ball disappeared on June 27, 1983, in Boca Raton, Florida. After leaving for a photo shoot, her badly decomposed body was discovered 3 months later by a hunter in Shelby, New York. 18-year-old Tammy Lynn Leppert, an aspiring model, vanished in Florida following a heated argument with a man resembling Christopher Wilder, Tammy's mother, who had been actively supporting her modeling career, claimed that Christopher and Tammy had met during a film casting session. During this meeting, Christopher reportedly asked to photograph Tammy, but she refused. 15-year-old Colleen Emily Osborne went missing after leaving her home in Daytona Beach, Florida, on March 15, 1984. That day, she missed her school bus, skipped classes to go to the beach, and never returned home. On April 6, 1984, her partially buried body was found near a lake in Orange County, Florida. Investigators later uncovered that Christopher Wilder had stayed at a nearby motel on the same day as her disappearance. One of Colleen's classmates reported seeing a man resembling Christopher at their school. scouting for models, the man had offered $100 to a girl willing to pose for him. But Colleen declined. Christopher Wilder is remembered as one of the most notorious serial killers in the United States, infamously known by the nicknames the Beauty Queen Killer and the Snapshot Killer. The bodies of Rosario and Elizabeth were never recovered. It has been confirmed that he kidnapped 12 women and murdered 9 of them. Authorities also suspect his involvement in several other similar crimes in the United States and Australia during that period.